Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. An endangered
We're just working to secure the carcass, and we're initially examining the animals and working on a plan to do further exam.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Yeagan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News. Programming note, the Mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, will be with us February 13th from 11 to noon here at the Boston Public Library. Good morning.
Hey there, Marjorie. How are you?
Good, thanks.
So Travis Kelce is going to the Super Bowl. We'll talk about that in about 30 minutes with Treny Casey. But first, we want to get to the real issue. Taylor Swift is going to the Super Bowl, too. Did you see Renee's Graham's column recently?
Yes, I
Why
did.
are men so triggered by Taylor Swift? Marjorie thinks it's about gender. She's pretty, blonde, makes a ton of money, doesn't care what people think of her. I think that's true, but also it's politics. If you have any doubt, just imagine the exultation if Swift was a right-winger. If she was a conservative, they would love her. You know, the right says this. Obviously, all 91 indictments of Trump are all about Joe Biden. The $83 million defamation thing, a plot by Joe Biden. And apparently now, if you listen and read right-wing media, this whole Taylor Swift thing is a left-wing plot, seriously, by Joe Biden. Have you read this stuff, by the way? At the end of the game, after the Kansas City Chiefs win, and Ramaswamy says it is already cooked. The NFL has already agreed. Chiefs are going to win.
Game's going to be rigged.
And after the two of them kiss, after the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, there's going to be some neon light in our forehead and a tiara saying, vote for Joe Biden. So our question here is, why can't a famous singer-songwriter just be a famous singer-songwriter rather than a left-wing plant for Joe Biden? The number's 877-301-8970. You know, this reminds me of the brilliance of our former colleague at our old radio station who came up with the war on Christmas. There was not a war on Christmas. Right. Everybody became obsessed. And if you read these stories and you go online, you go on Twitter, there is this whole thing about the Taylor Swift plant to endorse Joe Biden, and that's all that the Super Bowl is about. And, you know, I'm not exactly, as we've discussed 1,000 times, the most fun person who ever lived. But can't something just be fun on its own, on the merits, the whole Taylor Swift involved in the NFL thing, rather than this be yet another Biden plot to sink Donald Trump?
It is. This guy that does studies extremism and disinformation, he's got a great quote in this piece on CNN from Oliver Darcy, who covers the media.
He's reliable sources,
and he's saying the individuals and outlets spreading conspiracy theories about Taylor Swift sound ridiculous because they are. But they are also among the leading sources of information for modern conservatives, and they have the financial backing of Republican elites to spread exactly this kind of nonsense. And I mean, I think it's a great point. I mean, they are actually talking about this all over right-wing media, that she's a psych-op or psycho-op or whatever that is.
Well, you want to hear this?
For
Here's
the Pentagon.
Jesse Waters,
prime
prime time.
Yep.
He's aired a conspiracy theory, as Marjorie says, this psych-op thing from the Pentagon. I don't even understand it either. Using her fan base to drum up support for Joe Biden. Here's a little clip from Waters.
I mean, I like her music. She's all right. But, I mean, have you ever wondered why or how she blew up like this? Well, around 4 years ago, the Pentagon's Psychological Operations Unit floated turning Taylor Swift into an asset during a NATO meeting. What kind of asset? A PSYOP for combating online misinformation.
Marjorie and I don't even know what a PSYOP is, but we know that it is a conspiracy theory. The number is 877-301-8097. I'm serious.
He's a big deal.
Everything.
He's in Tucker Carlson's old place.
I know
Prime
exactly
Time on
who he
Fox.
is. I know he's huge.
Well, I'm just telling the listeners.
Every single thing has got to be a polarizing issue in this country, including Taylor Swift and what's his name, and Travis Kelce hanging out with each other.
Now, on the romantic side, someone is suggesting that after the vote for Biden thing on the halftime, the 50-yard line.
Blinks, it's going to blink.
Yeah, that he's going to come out and propose. But I don't think he can come out and propose in the middle of the game. Do you think? I don't think Travis can do that in the middle of the game.
Actually, I've studied this, and I think if they get a first down and call a timeout, if they call a timeout, during the timeout, I think they're usually 2 minutes, there's enough time for her to run onto the field, him to propose, then run back to the suite.
Or if the game is a blowout, Kansas City's way ahead, at the 2-minute warning at the end of the game, that's when he can come out and then he can propose.
No, can I tell you something? If they proposed, if he proposed to her during the game, I've done a lot of research on this, the likelihood of Joe Biden performing the ceremony after the trophy is awarded.
That's right.
That is really possible and really unfair. 877-301-8097. I assume most people are smiling about this, but in all seriousness, when someone listens to Jesse Waters and listens to him talking about how she's a PSYOP for the Pentagon, and it was crafted during a NATO meeting years ago. Are people nodding in agreement and saying, yes, that's the case?
The other thing is, in Renee Graham's column, when she was asking why men are so triggered by Taylor Swift, she's talking about this NFL Hall of Fame big deal, former head coach Tony Dungy.
Tony Dungy's big deal.
Yes, who was complaining about the so-called Taylor Swift effect having a negative impact
ruining the game
on baseball. It's disenchanting.
Football, too.
Yeah, it's just disenchanting people with sports, he said. There's so much on the outside coming in. Now, as Renee Graham points out, the odd thing about what Dungy says is that the NFL's 23-24 season has been the second most watched ever. Monday Night Football had its highest viewership, and 1 out of 100 of the top TV sports telecasts this year, 93 of them out of the top of 100 are football games.
Do you know my understanding, I listened this morning, the only number that is greater than the number of people who watched that football game were the number of people at Trump's inauguration in 2016. Did you know that? 877-301-8970 is the number. Let's go to Ann in a car. You're first on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for your call, Ann. Hi.
Hi, Tim and Marjorie. Thank you so much. I listen every day.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I read Renee Graham's column and thought it was very interesting. I haven't heard anything about all the other right-wing stuff, but after reading her column, my feeling is that all those men that are males that are complaining, dissing her, whatever, it's because they're jealous. They don't have a hot, super smart, multimillionaire, talented girlfriend, significant other, whatever, and they're mad because they ain't got one.
Well, I think that's a more concise version of Renee's point of view than Renee's, and it's a good one, Ann. Ann, thanks for the call.
Or I think that they might be upset that she has so much power. I mean, that I think is very annoying to a lot of people. On the other hand, her efforts in 2018 to get people to vote for the Democrat that was running for Senate in her
Against
home
Marsha
state of Tennessee.
Blackburn,
Did not work. I mean, she tried to urge people not to vote for Marsha. As you said, it did not. It
Well,
did not work.
can I tell you something, though, on a serious note, and this has nothing to do with the plot BS coming from right-wing media. There was a poll on CNN this morning. Joe Biden won this is frightening, actually, 18 to 29-year-olds 4 years ago by 24 points. You know how much he's leading the same demographic now? 2 points.
Yeah.
Drop of 22 points. Obviously, if there's any demographic within which Taylor Swift would have an impact, not that, again, that it's some plot, you would argue it's there.
So let me just mention a couple more of these right-wing examples.
Please.
Taylor Swift's is an op, says a guy named Benny Johnson.
Who?
Benny Johnson, I don't know him, but
I don't know
apparently
him
he's
either.
got millions of followers across different
Great.
social media platforms. And it's all fake. He says you're being played. And then there's somebody else called Laura Loomer, who I guess is a big deal, that she says the Democrats' Taylor Swift election interference psych op, is that how you say it? PSYOP.
PSYOP is what it is,
PSYOP
yeah.
is happening in the open. It's not a coincidence that current and former Biden administration officials are propping up Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. They're going to use Taylor Swift as the poster child for their pro-abortion Go TV campaign.
Oh, there you go. Get out the vote.
Yeah, get out the vote.
877-301-8970.
I forgot the other thing that's really
What?
annoying people that may not, they're very far right. Well, Travis Kelce's done the ads for vaccinations.
Oh, he does Pfizer ads,
Yes,
doesn't he?
he does. Pfizer ads, they are not for erectile dysfunction, Jim. They are for vaccinations, and I guess that's pushing people
Can I
over
ask you
the
a
edge
question?
as well.
What did I say that caused you to say they're not for erectile dysfunction?
Because Pfizer is the maker of Viagra.
Oh, they are?
Yes.
Oh.
You didn't know Pfizer made Viagra?
I did. Well, I do now, and I
Yeah.
thought you were reacting to something I said.
No.
or thought.
No.
Okay, Joe and Bolton, you're on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about this PSYOP plot, or whatever it means, around Taylor Swift. Hey there, Joe.
Hello. I want to say that I love your show,
Thank you.
and this is my second or third time that I've called. But I wanted to point out, back in the days of the Jews will not replace us and the
Charlottesville, yep.
marches and so on of the crazies, Taylor Swift was considered a Nordic goddess by some of the extreme right-wing people. So how did this Nordic goddess suddenly turn into a sinister left-wing psyop? I mean, I think she's pretty, and I don't think I've ever listened to her music, but then I'm an old guy. But that's an interesting switch on her part.
Well, particularly, I thought you were going to go, because remember when Donald Trump, when he was president, was talking about migration from all those S-hole countries, and then he cited, what did he say? Why don't we have more people coming from Norway? So I assume that was a related theme. I don't know when the turnaround happened. But it's happened, Joe. And listen to the show, and maybe somebody will have a good explanation. Joe, thank you very much for the call. We appreciate it.
You know what's incredible is that she's also brought huge viewership from young women into the NFL games, which of course are top the ratings all the time. And Travis Kelce's paraphernalia, or whatever his T-shirts or whatever he sells.
Merchandise, we call it.
400% increase in
Yeah.
sales.
Think it's because of him?
No, I think it's because of her.
I think it's
because of her. 877-301-8970 is the number. Let's go to John in Peabody. Hi, John.
Hey, John.
Hey guys, how you doing?
We're good, thank you.
I've called multiple times. Marjorie knows I'm a Trump hater, but this stuff, every time something else comes up, I read this yesterday, all these things. These people are so far over the edge. Did you see the Scott Greer quote?
No.
No, we missed that.
She says, the right needs its own Taylor Swift for young women to look up to. The answer is we already have her, Lauren Boebert.
Well, it's true. That's true. No, but that is. What do you mean? No, that is what it is.
Why would you be looking up to Lauren Boebert? I guess I'd have to.
Well, if you want to go to the
ask.
movies and have someone put their hand in your crotch, Lauren Boebert is just the person
And
for
be
you.
vaping in the audience.
Exactly.
That's a good one. I didn't hear that one. Well, somebody texted John a couple of seconds ago that we have Taylor Swift and they have Kid Rock, meaning conservative people, they have Kid Rock. So
I don't think Kid Rock is quite in the stratosphere.
Well,
of
I think that's
fame
what they were
that-
saying, that Taylor's much more of a big
I see.
deal
I got it.
than
John,
Kid
thanks
Rock
for the
would
call.
be.
We appreciate it. By the way, this Pfizer thing, we have a clip here that's a compilation from Fox News that really addresses both of them, the Demon Swift and they demon Kelsey because of his embrace of Pfizer. Here are a couple of hosts from Fox News. The last one, of course, is Janine Pirro. Well, just listen to what they have to say.
We have had enough of Taylor Swift for now, but here's the facts. Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl, and now there's an online plea circulating that is begging people to become Niners fans for the next 2 weeks. Just so it doesn't raise Travis Kelce, a.k.a. Mr. Pfizer's star power, along with, of course, Taylor Swift.
A single post of hers led to 35,000 new registrants. That's a whopping amount of power. That's arguably more power than the president.
Don't get involved in politics. We don't want to see you there. But Joe Biden's in the hole with young people. He knows it. And if he thinks Taylor can get him out of that hole, he's going to go for it.
Actually, that's not that as insane as I thought. That probably makes quite a bit of sense. And the reason they're so upset with Pfizer, I didn't realize that it's so obvious, the connection. It's because of the vaccine thing. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's why they're mad at him, because of the vaccine. Now, here's somebody named Mike Crispy, who's one of these big influencers on the right, too. It's a Salem media host. The NFL is totally rigged for the Kansas City Chiefs.
It is.
Taylor Swift and Mr. Pfizer, that's Travis Kelce, all to spread Democrat propaganda, calling it now. Casey wins, goes to the Super Bowl, and then, of course, as we said before, his expectation, Mr. Crispy, is that Swift comes out at the halftime show and endorses Joe Biden with Kelce at midfield.
Can I say, I ask you this question quite regularly, and I know it aggravates you whenever I ask it, so I'll try it again. Before we take a break, how many millions of people hear this and believe the Super Bowl is fixed in favor of the Kansas City Chiefs so that Mr. Pfizer can have his moment and Taylor Swift can have her Joe Biden moment? How many people believe that?
I would say millions.
Millions?
Yeah.
Believe it or are just sort of nodding in...
Well, how many people think that the election was rigged? Isn't it two-thirds
Oh, that's a very good point.
of Republicans?
That's a very good point.
I mean, people are in their news bubbles, and this is, I mean...
So they think the Super Bowl is fixed so that the Kansas City Chiefs can win, so that the focus after the win is Taylor Swift embracing Travis Kelce, at which point she allegedly endorses the and by the way, she endorsed Biden in 2020. She's obviously a Democrat. She's not. That's not a surprise. Is that that's what they believe?
I guess so, and that you know.
Does that trouble you at all?
It troubles me tremendously, but I don't know what the answer. I mean, as we've said a million times, it's a testament to the power of disinformation, and I fear it's going to get worse.
Okay, we got to take a break.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We're talking about whether or not the NFL has cooked the game so the Kansas City Chiefs have win. I wonder if the San Francisco 49ers are aware of this controversy against them. I wonder if they know that Taylor Swift works at the Pentagon.
Well, they do now, if they didn't know before.
Okay. The number, if you want to weigh in on the frenzy over Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, the number to call or text, 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live from the library, streaming at Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News. If you're just joining us, well, actually the lines are full, but you can text us at 877-301-8097. We're talking about the latest right-wing conspiracy theory which is the Super Bowl is part of a left-wing plot that's fixed for the Kansas City Chiefs so that when Taylor Swift endorses Joe Biden, it sort of gets, what are you laughing about? Maximum play. 877-301-8970. And while we're laughing, it's really disturbing, actually.
Okay, here's Mary from Weymouth who says, well, Biden must be sharper than the right wing wants us to know if he can engineer all these things, including fixing the Super Bowl. And Paul from Worcester says, my conspiracy theory is that someone is getting fired for not booking Taylor Swift for the halftime show. Imagine her and her boyfriend dancing on stage from a ratings point of view.
877-301-8970. Katie in Boston, you're next. Hi, Katie. Welcome.
Hi, first time, long time.
We love that. Thank you.
Yep. I think, Marjorie, you're exactly right. She wields so much power, and the right wing sees her as a threat, so they are going after her. I think that's the bottom line, what this is all about.
Yeah, well, I think especially after her initial thing down in Tennessee, her home state, was just urging people to get out and vote, and she didn't say for whom.
Register, actually. Yeah.
You register to vote, yeah, thank you. And there was a big bump in people registering after that, but I think when she was endorsed a Democrat, that put her on the wrong side, and I think that really annoyed a lot of people, you know.
By the way, Katie, if it turns out all it was what you described, that they're jealous of her power and her talent and her skills, I mean, so be it. It's the conspiracy part of this that's really putting me over the edge,
I think there's also an annoyance that she's in at a football game. I mean, Renee Graham had a great point. A lot of male, big superstars. Spike Lee was always who do you root for? The New York Mets or
Knicks. He's a Knicks fan.
He's a Knicks fan, and Jack Nicholson, the actor,
L.A. Lakers.
L.A. Lakers always at those games in the 80s and 90s, and Seinfeld is always at games for the Mets, I guess, and that is okay. But there seems to be some senses they don't want a woman to be so.
Who's they? Who's they? The right?
The people that don't like her. There's been a lot of complaining about how often the TV cameras have gone up to the box where she's next to Mahomes' wife and sometimes Mahomes' baby.
Yeah.
And why do we have to keep showing Taylor Swift? And there was a piece the other day that was saying actually they don't really show her very much, maybe once or twice.
They don't show her enough, as far as I'm concerned. Katie, do you think the game is fixed?
No, I really don't see how you can do that.
Yeah.
There's so many different variables, but I really think that they view her as a threat, and they're trying to, tear her down as much as they can.
Well, they are, and I don't think they'll succeed. But, Katie, thanks for your first call. Make another one soon, please.
Sandra from Cranston asked a great question. I wish the Democrats were good enough to get Kansas City into the Super Bowl and get one of the players to date Taylor Swift. And if they could do that, then why can't they dominate the elections?
That's a very good point. 877-301-8970 is our number. John, it's like everything. Can you think of one fun thing that hasn't been ruined by conspiracy talk in this country? Is there one fun thing?
I'm sure there are a few things, but none pops to mind at the second moment. 877-301-8970. John from Westford, thank you for calling.
Hi there, John. Hello.
Hi. I think that one reason why a lot of conservatives and people on the right are annoyed by her is that they see a lot of celebrities promoting the left and getting away with it in outrageous ways, and then a lot of conservatives in Hollywood are shut down completely and canceled. I mean, people like Jon Voight, Bruce Willis, Pat Boone, Caitlyn Jenner. I mean, but then on the left, you'll have people like Kathy Griffin or even
Kathy Griffin, John.
Well,
Kathy
she got
Griffin
a lot of grief.
essentially lost her career for years because of that stunt with Trump's head. She didn't get away with it. She lost millions of dollars.
As she should, but there's so many that, like Beyonce throwing a last-minute concert for Hillary, Johnny Depp, Madonna. It just seems like if you speak out in Hollywood and you're not going lockstep with the liberal movement, you're ostracized.
I think there may be some truth to that, John. John, thanks for the call. We appreciate it.
Well,
it's true.
I think this is a particularly difficult time. I mean, as I've said a million times, I mean, you got a guy running for president who wants to become an authoritarian and, take away Obamacare and stymie every effort to stop climate change, not to mention, the terrible stuff he's talked about doing on the border, the fact that he wants to have internment camps for people who are here as coming across the border illegally. I mean, this is not just, W. Bush running against John Kerry.
Yeah, but
this
I think
is a different situation.
But I think even pre-Trump, don't you think that in Hollywood, which obviously is dominated by liberal performers, that if you were an outlier, if you were a conservative, you were. I mean, I interviewed John Voight at the Sarah Palin.
Yep.
John McCain convention. I was admittedly a Republican convention. I remember to this day, that was a long time ago, him talking about being ostracized. I mean, a pretty great actor, I think most people would agree, and spectacular. So I think there's some truth in that, even if it was not a Trump kind of deal.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, there were people years ago that were big Republican fans. I'm going back a long way, but, John Wayne.
Yeah, but by the way, let me just be clear.
Heston.
What John was saying a minute ago, the issue to me is not ostracization, is that the proper word? Or embrace liberalism versus conservative in Hollywood. It's a conspiracy theory. I am not one of these shut up and dribble kind of people. Even for an odious person like the former pitcher, Curt Schilling, who's a total right-winger. I mean, when he gets into this Nazi stuff, it's too much for me. He wants to embrace right-wingers. My view is if you have a platform and are willing to risk your platform, then go for it. I mean, I have no problem with that in the slightest. The issue is not that for me, John. The issue is everything has to have a conspiracy theory about it, and it really is sort of sick and childish and stupid. Katrina in Medfield. Medville? Medville. I don't know where it is, but hello, Katrina. Oh, Medfield. Thanks for coming. Hi, Medfield. Hello there, Katrina. How are you?
Hi. Good. How are you?
Excellent. What's on? What's up?
So I felt really struck to stand up for the older gentleman who very proudly admitted to never having listened to Taylor's music and not knowing much. But Jim, I feel like you kind of brushed him off too quickly on his point that she went from a symbol of like a Nordic Aryan goddess to this liberal demon, because I think that's the point.
What is
how
the point?
Arbitrary and absurd everything is.
Wait,
the point is that The point is that now that she has more power than ever, people are threatened, and it's just the absurdity of it all. That when it's her looks alone, she's a Nordic goddess, but when she starts, affecting the global economy, she's a demon. I mean, that's literally the reason these people are freaking out.
That's a very good point. You were totally right. I did miss the point. I'm glad you were there to fill in the blanks. Katrina, thanks for the call. You're totally right.
Yeah, that's a great point. And somebody texted, I should have said this already, one of the things that annoys other people with Travis Kelce is he's done ads for Bud Light. And there was a lot of...
He has done ads?
Yes, and one of the pushbacks, and he also supported Colin Kaepernick. So he's on the wrong side of a lot of these issues if you are a right-winger kind of guy.
What if it turns out Biden's not available to do the nuptials? What if Colin Kaepernick was sworn in as you can get sworn in for a day as a pastor or something to do a wedding, right? Yeah. He kneals and does a Travis Kelce.
Someone else suggested RFK Jr. as the ring bearer. But I don't know if Biden and RFK Jr. are a pair.
I don't know if that really fits. We have time for one more quick one. That's Bob in Newport. Welcome to the show, Bob. Thanks for calling. Hi.
Hey, how you doing? When I was in the Marine Corps some 40 years ago, PSYOP stood for the Single Integrated Operational Plan. It was the contingencies for immediate action on nuclear codes. If we go to war, if a catastrophe happens, that was what the PSYOP. It's an acronym.
So wait a second. Does that mean that Taylor Swift will decide whether we go to war in Iran? Is that?
I don't know. I don't know what they want to do with it today, but that's what PSYOP stood for.
Bob, thanks for the tutorial, because we did not know. Thank you very much.
It's sorry to rush off, but we're out of time. But because we're going to talk next with NBC Sports' Treny Casey. She's going to tell us about her interpretation of the Taylor Swift mania, and also why Belichick does not have a job yet. Or maybe he does. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy. We're live from the library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. Ask the Mayor right here at the library, February 13th, 11 to 12. We're joined now by Treny Casey, anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston and a BPR Weekly contributor. Hello there, Treny.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Hi, we're good.
Have you guys just been watching Taylor and Travis videos, too?
I've watched a
yes,
few
we
of them.
have.
Yes, I have. Very nice. And you're talking about the ones at the game, or are you talking about other ones?
Well, the ones at the game where she embraces him and he tells her he loves her so much, and she says, I love you, and then he's like, I'm going to go party with the guys, and she's like, you go have fun. It's just
Is that really what happened?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I missed that
Jim,
part.
If you go on the Insta, you can go on the deepest dive and find different angles
Fabulous.
of like their interaction after the game.
Now, do you have any insight?
It's Taylor Swift fans' Roman Empire. That's what everyone's
Okay,
calling it.
so since you know much more about the sporting world than we do you have any insight as to when in the game she will endorse Joe Biden? Do you have do you know what time that'll happen?
I mean, my guess is like after a Travis Kelce touchdown.
Oh,
And
touchdown. That's a great
If
idea.
that doesn't happen, though, by halftime, maybe any Kansas City touchdown, just
That's
to
a
make
great
sure
idea.
that they get it in.
I think
maybe
that's true.
she'll tell Biden, she'll whisper in his ear, I love you. Have fun. I mean, I think that there's like all these different ways.
Yeah.
Guys, like Sean, my husband and I were talking about this morning, and I'm like, I just can't believe like these conspiracies. He's like, this is the group of people who think Oprah and Ted and Tom Hanks eat babies to stay alive. Like, why does this surprise you that it's like that it's so crazy and out there?
By the way, speaking of that, when this all started, do you remember we ate at Comet Ping Pong Pizza?
Yes.
During Trump's inauguration?
Yes.
That was the restaurant where allegedly in the basement,
yes.
Hillary Clinton
Trafficking.
and John Podesta,
Well, the guy
that consultant,
that was the chief pusher of that theory is one of the Taylor Swift
I know
people,
that.
too.
I know
Same
that.
Same person.
A child sex ring in the basement was the theory
Obviously.
of
Now,
that. Can we talk about what? Go ahead.
Before we get to that, I just want to make sure, because
We'll
you
get
are a
to what?
sports
I didn't say
expert,
anything yet.
is the NFL rigging the game
No.
for the Kansas City Chiefs
No,
so
they're
that
not
Taylor
rigging
can
I
come
think they
out
are.
at halftime?
I think they are.
Listen,
endorse Joe Biden?
do you know how hard it is to rig a football? It's hard to rig any game,
It is.
right? Like at some point you would have to have players involved. Like the idea that the NFL would rig something just because of like people are going to watch whether or not the Chiefs win. Like newsflash, the Super Bowl is always the most watched television program
Huge.
in
Yep.
the United States. Last year, I think like of the top 100 things that aired on television, 88 of them
93.
There we go. 93 of them were NFL
Football
games. Like what this does, I mean, it does make football more popular, but it makes football more popular among a group of people who weren't watching it before. I prefer to look at the positive aspects of
Which
this.
are?
Like just this morning, I was scrolling the Instagram. God,
Yeah.
I'm like a 12-year-old.
No, it's fine.
And
You're
I saw
honest.
something from the Washington Post, and they were focusing on dads with teenage daughters and dads who are at this crossroads where when your daughter's a kid, you can kind of be like a little daddy's girl, but once you become a teenager, you start to go through changes and things start to happen, and you don't talk to him about your dad, and you sort of lose that connection for a while. And these dads are finding that there's a common ground, that their girls now want to, who were not interested in football before, and they're not just interested in Taylor Swift. What a lot of these fathers have talked about is that sure, Taylor Swift, that might have been the reason they watched the game in the first place, but then they watch and they're curious. And they start having conversations with their dad about it. And it opens a door in that relaxed environment for those fathers to have conversations about other things. So start kind of like reopening those relationships with those women. I also think it's a great way to expose, the NFL is now getting exposed to a new audience. Maybe if, maybe 10 million people watched football who didn't watch it before. If you only get 3 million more that stick with it, that's still 3 million more people who are watching your product. Like, you're not going to retain everybody if they break up or Travis retires. But I just do not, I don't understand. I mean, I do know why, but I don't understand why people are so weird about this. But I know why. It's because it's a woman.
Yeah.
Well, it's also because they're weird
had-
about everything in this country. Every single thing, as we said a few minutes ago, is a conspiracy. Everything is a conspiracy.
I know.
And by the way, speaking of that, I just read on the Associated Press while you were talking, purportedly, the quarterback for the 49ers, Brock Purdy, has been told he can only throw with his left hand during the game, and he's right-handed. I don't know if it's true. I'm just reporting what I'm reading. You decide for yourself.
I heard Kamala Harris took a private jet, which you cannot track, went to his house and told him they would murder his family if he did anything but lose the Super Bowl.
Can we just talk about the Super Bowl for 1 second? Because I'm assuming we'll do this next week.
Who's going to win?
No, I don't care about who's going to win.
I do.
I just want to say.
I would like to know who's going to win.
Mahomes is such an incredible.
He's an incredible quarterback.
Seen anything. And, you know, in a lot of sports, let me think of this. Yeah, basketball in particular. If you have one great player, my mindset is always one great player can dominate a game. It's only 5 players on a team kind of thing. I've never thought that about football except occasionally with Tom Brady. I had no doubt they were going to win this game, even though the Ravens were favored, because the guy is a total magician. He is unbelievable.
And much like Tom Brady, has a mindset where even if he's so supremely confident in his abilities that even though the offense was not clicking for much of the year for Kansas City, and the Patriots under Tom Brady were always like this. They might not have been great in September. They might not have been great in October. But especially once that calendar turned to December, Tom Brady knew to focus in and knew to find different ways to win games for them. And that's what Patrick Mahomes can do. Now, I am not.
Plus, he can run.
And he can run. I'm not in this group that thinks Patrick Mahomes is threatening the legacy of Tom Brady or that he's like a better quarterback. Like what Tom Brady accomplished, we may never see again in our lifetime. And Patrick Mahomes, in my opinion, has a long way to go before he gets there. But he's really fun to watch. Travis Kelce went through a stretch. Again, people were blaming the fact that he was in a relationship. You know, God forbid.
The Yoko Ono thing.
Yeah, the Yoko Ono thing. He went through a stretch where he wasn't playing very well, and now in the postseason, which is where these guys shine, like they have this mentality that I think is an intimidation factor. Like Tiger on Sundays, right? Like back in the day when Tiger Woods was at his peak, guys used to say they knew if he was even within striking distance on a Sunday and you saw him walk up, the fairway, you were like,
that red shirt.
In that red shirt, like, kind of we're screwed. And I think people felt that way about Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski, and now people feel that way about Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce.
For those who know nothing about Travis Kelce who are listening other than the Taylor Swift thing, he broke the all-time record this weekend, and he's still in his 20s?
No, he's 30.
He's 34.
He's born
he's 34. That's right. Okay.
He was born in 1989.
Same year. Okay, fine. Forget that. So he's still, but 34 is not that old.
No.
He has broken the all-time record for most receptions by any receiver in the postseason already. I mean, it's unbelievable. The guy is beating Gronkowski, beating Jerry Rice, beating all these great players.
Yeah, I mean, he's been in the league. Let's see if you come in at, I don't know if he came in at 22, but I think he's in like his 12th year in the league. Like that's a long career.
But nobody else has done it. Right.
His brother is already retired. His brother, I think, is 2 years older than him or a year older than him. But no one else has ever done it. Like admittedly, I used to find him kind of annoying. But now that I've learned more about him through his relationship with Taylor Swift, I like him now.
That's right. I
like him now.
He's got a great personality.
But what was never in doubt was his talent. Like, he is one of and people will say that he's more of a receiving tight end. Like Rob Gronkowski was more of sort of an all-around tight end. Like, I don't have a big bruising guy. But what always hurt Rob Gronkowski and why it's amazing that he's so high up on all of the all-time lists, Rob Gronkowski, he suffered so many injuries. Travis Kelce, by and large, has been pretty healthy his entire career.
Okay, so let's move on. Why does Bill Belichick not yet have a coaching job?
Well, he doesn't seem to be really in demand. Everyone thought for sure that it was kind of a shoo-in that he was going to be the next head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Arthur Blank, who is the owner of the Falcons, brought him in for 2 interviews, both times private jet, one time private jet to the Virgin Islands on the yacht.
I didn't know that.
Everybody thought okay, this is a shoo-in, but the reporting around this is that the people around Arthur Blank said, I don't know if this is the right guy for the job. And people are speculating that it would be so much turnover that if Bill Belichick came into the Atlanta Falcons, he would want to bring in everybody he's always worked with before. He would want Josh McDaniels to run the offense. He would want Matt Patricia to run the defense. He would want Joe Judge to run the special teams. He wanted his kids probably to come down, and he would want so much control. And the people around Arthur Blank, and I think kind of it was an astute move, said, do you really want all of this for 2 years? And that's what Bill Belichick is really up against. He's only going to coach for a couple more years.
Yeah.
He really wants to hit the Don Shula mark. And I think if he could win another Super Bowl, obviously he would like to win another Super Bowl. But he doesn't, he's 71, almost 72 years old. Like, he's not going to coach much longer. And so it's a short-term solution for your franchise when I think when you've got they need a quarterback in Atlanta, but they have a lot of young players on offense, young players on defense. Do you want a guy who's 2 years in and then out? And say you get your quarterback of the future. Say you get him in the draft this year. And then you have an offensive coordinator and a head coach that's there for 2 years, and then you leave and you have to switch. I mean, that has been the death knell for a ton. Look at Mac Jones. When there's constant turnover in your coaching staff, or especially on the offensive side of the ball, you just don't have an opportunity to develop. And I think that's weighing on a lot of people.
Where did I read that Belichick wouldn't talk to Mac Jones?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere, yeah. Tommy Curran had a great story yesterday and actually talked to Mac Jones's quarterback coach, like his private coach that he worked with, I think since he was 11 years old. And there was a pretty telling phrase that he used, an interception that sort of sealed the end of Mac Jones's career in New England, the interception against the Colts in Germany. He said when he watched the video, this quarterback's coach, when he watched the video of Mac throwing that interception, he was like, the noose around his neck got so tight that it killed him. It killed his career. Like he and I'm paraphrasing because that's not like the right word, like the exact thing that he said, but it's something like that. Like he was under so much pressure by Belichick, and he was given no resources, and everything had gotten so bad, and the pressure became so much that he crumbled under all of the pressure.
Is there any truth to the rumor that Taylor Swift's going to hire him to be her tour manager? Is that, have you heard that or
Bill
not?
Belichick or
Bill Belichick.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, he is a Taylor Swift fan.
Yeah, he is.
Well, one last thing about Belichick.
No.
He might
He
might go into TV.
Well, I wondered about that. I mean, he's obviously been obnoxious in these press conferences with the media, but he could be a different person on TV or not.
Yeah, I mean, everybody points to he did this thing with NFL Network where it was like the 100 years of football, like an anniversary or something. He won an Emmy for it. He is, when talking about the game, and reporters will say this. Reporters will say if you get Bill on a Friday when he's in a good mood and you ask him about the history of the game or to break down like certain plays, and sort of the machinations of everything, he's a wealth of knowledge. He is a football encyclopedia. There's no doubting that. It's the way that he communicated, I think, under pressure from the media, where maybe he felt judged. I wonder if he was in a seat where he's there to offer explanations about another team, a team he's not in charge of, if he would be more forthcoming.
Yeah.
Well, here's my prediction. I mean, another really dull guy is Tom Brady. Doesn't mean he's not one of the greatest quarterback of all time. I've never heard him say an interesting or controversial thing about anything that I can think of. Maybe so. He's allegedly going to be paid $37 million next year to be a Fox sports commentator. I mean, this is a serious comment by me. I find Belichick even duller, even when he's talking about things he cares about. Why not pair the two dullards? I'm serious. Brady and Belichick together on Fox News. Wouldn't that draw zillions of eyeballs?
Fox Sports, yeah.
Fox Sports,
has been suggested.
Oops,
It's been
sorry.
No.
Okay.
It's still your independent thought.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Supported by others.
Thank you.
I mean, maybe it'll happen. I don't know if Fox would want to pay. Like, I do wonder, would Fox have to pay Belichick as much or more than Brady in order to get him to sign on? I don't know. And honestly, from what I understand, again, I'm not close to the team in any way, shape, or form. And from what I understand, Brady and Belichick did sort of bury the hatchet. But it would be interesting to see if they could get along in that sort of format, like all the time.
You know what I wonder? What happens to Belichick's kids if he doesn't go to another coaching job? Are they Are they good enough to go someplace else on their own?
My team, the Packers, are looking for a defensive coordinator. And when I was looking at a list of possible candidates, Steve Belichick was on that list.
Yeah.
I thought they were offered jobs by Gerard Mayo to stay with the Patriots.
They were. So this is where that gets a little like foggy. So Steve Belichick was basically like a co-defensive coordinator with Gerard Mayo. Neither were ever given a title. Gerard, I think, was sort of the coordinator. Steve Belichick called plays on game day. So he wore the headset. He called the defensive plays that they were supposed to run. But the Patriots reportedly are on the verge of naming DeMarcus Covington their defensive coordinator, who was the Patriots' defensive line coach. So my question is, if I'm Steve Belichick, do I want to come back to the Patriots and either take because if DeMarcus Covington is the defensive coordinator,
he's jumping over Belichick.
One would think he'll call plays and that he's leapfrogging Steve Belichick. So do I want to go back to a place where, one, my father was pushed out, even though he has a good relationship with Gerard, and two, now I'm going to have basically a same or lesser job than I did before? I don't know if that's appealing. I think that's sort of what they're trying to figure out.
What about the other one?
Brian Belichick, safeties coach. I mean, listen, if it's me, and a lot of other people agree, I think it's sort of a common thought. I don't know why Steve and Brian would want to follow their dad again. It's only going to be probably a 2-year stint if they're lucky. And at some point, don't you want to prove that you can do it without your daddy?
Yeah.
Like at some point, you have to stand on your own 2 feet and show that
why
you
is
can.
that even? He's never getting a job. This notion that I hear on sports radio, he didn't get a job this year, but when he's a year older, a year away, all of a sudden jobs are going to. I don't quite get it.
I don't either. I really thought that there would be. I didn't think it would be a robust market, like similar to like when Tom Brady left here. I think some people thought that he would have like the pick of teams to go to. Again, Brady too, he was towards the end of his career. And so I think people were hesitant to hire him or sign him. But obviously the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did. That was very lucrative for them. They won a Super Bowl, worked out very well. I mean, when Bill Belichick was first fired by the Patriots, most people thought that Philly and or Dallas would fire their current head coach just to have an opportunity to have Bill Belichick coach their team, and that hasn't happened. Now, I don't know if people think, we did have Shireen Williams on from Pro Football Talk after the Cowboys decided to retain Mike McCarthy. And she's like, listen, I don't know that Jerry Jones likes Mike McCarthy, but he's a cheap guy. So he doesn't want to have to pay Mike McCarthy and pay Bill Belichick. So maybe there's sort of a handshake, wink, and a smile that I'm going to let McCarthy try it one more time. And if he doesn't get it done next year, then I don't have to pay him out. And then maybe he goes and takes over a ready-made team in Dallas, goes there for 2 years, and then they move on. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how that's... If Bill Belichick had continued to do in New England post Tom Brady what he did with Tom Brady, I would think his market would be better. But I think there are a lot of people who look at Bill Belichick and say, I know you're a good coach, but I don't want you anywhere near my offense, and I don't want you anywhere near my personnel, and I don't know if he's willing to give up that power.
What were you about to say?
Here's a real-world analysis from Gene in Derry, New Hampshire.
Oh, I like this.
Bill Belichick is worth an estimated $70 million. He isn't going to be in the breadline anytime soon. It may be petty, but if he doesn't get hired again as a pro football coach, cry me a river.
I don't necessarily disagree. I mean, no one should feel bad. He's getting paid, and I don't know the exact sum, but let's just assume he was fired, even though it was a mutual agreed departure
by Kraft.
By Kraft. The rumor is he was getting paid $25 million, so he's getting paid. I'll sit home for $5 million. You don't need to pay me $25 million. I'll sit home for $5 million.
Okay, so
you can get rid of me for $1 million.
Me too. I'm with you.
Maybe not that much. You can't live forever on $1 million. $1 million after taxes doesn't get you very far. So I'd at least need a little.
Not around here. You might need $2 million.
So
I am one of those Back Bay.
people, and there are a lot of them listening to the show, who for much of my life, one of the great joys was going to the mailbox and getting Sports Illustrated.
Oh, this is a terrible story.
Once a week, and it's been totally decimated, may not even survive. Could you bring people up to speed on this?
So this was shocking. Was this, I think it was just last week, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
There, all of a sudden, it hit, social media that Sports Illustrated, it was the same day that Wayfair laid off 1,800 people and Macy's laid off like 2,000 people and closed a bunch of stores. Later that afternoon, Sports Illustrated announced that they had sent out, and this is how everybody does it now. No one has any face-to-face conversations. They sent out an email giving everyone basically in the company a 90-day notice. That they had 90 days. So it's a little...
Well, some didn't get 90. Most got 90 days. Some were getting canned right on the spot.
Some got canned on the spot. Some of the people that I know who work there got 90-day notices. Really? So it is a little convoluted. I talked to someone I know who works for Sports Illustrated who does some work for us as well, and there's only 2 of them, so
who are they?
50-50. I'm not going to tell you. You have to figure it out. But they were telling me that it was... it was sort of portrayed as the death of Sports Illustrated. There is still a possibility that Sports Illustrated survives. So this is what keeps happening. These media companies, and this isn't even a media company, it's like an entertainment company. They take over a media conglomerate like Sports Illustrated, and they kind of bought the rights to continue printing it. But when they bought the rights from somebody else, they were supposed to pay X amount of dollars, and I guess they only paid like $3.5 million one month, and that was nowhere near what they had to pay for the rights to Sports Illustrated. And so they had to go into like, I guess it's sort of almost like a bankruptcy. So now they're trying to sell it to somebody else or try to figure out their financials. And if they can figure out their financials and someone can swoop in and take over Sports Illustrated that's more financially liquid, then it will survive. Probably not exactly how it is. My guess is there'll still be mass layoffs, but maybe they won't lay off everybody. But there's a chance that if they don't get this worked out, that like Sports Illustrated and everyone who works there in a couple of months, it just ceases to exist.
Which would be horrible.
Oh my God, I remember, like, I can remember always as a kid, and the thing I always remember is the faces in the crowd, right? Like, because that was
Explain what that feature was in the magazine.
So back in the day when you open a magazine, you've got like the table of contents for those of you kids who don't read magazines anymore, and then you'd open another page, and it was kind of right on the inside, and it was called Faces in the Crowd, and it always had two, usually high school or like Division I athletes who you had never heard of before. It might be like a cross country runner and a swimmer.
No, I agree.
And I think there were almost always a female and a male, and then there was a little blurb, and you could learn about what they were doing and the accomplishments that they had gotten in whatever small town in America. I mean, but I even just think about like I collected like the first time I really moved away from home from Wisconsin to Pennsylvania. Like as I was packing things up, I had stacks of Sports Illustrated under my bed because it was the first magazine I ever had a subscription to. I mean, I distinctly remember covers of Sports Illustrated. To like that marked some of my favorite sports memories as a kid growing up. Like to lose such an iconic, I mean, in all reality, this would be like all of a sudden one day Disney saying we're ceasing ESPN. It just ceases to exist, and everybody at ESPN gets a pink slip. Like and Sports Illustrated has been around much, much longer than this. It's
70 years, right?
It's just in a more of a dying.
By the way, do you know who one of the two bidders supposedly is to buy this? Is Jeff Zucker, formerly head of CNN until a year ago.
Where does the Athletic? How's that? Because the New York Times bought the Athletic.
Yes.
That's a great.
That's their sports page.
website.
Yeah, that's like their sports page.
Yeah,
now.
Is that doing well?
I mean, I think so. I don't know how it is doing financially.
Yeah.
But I think pairing with the New York Times has now you have independent subscriptions to it.
And
as well
Times
as New York Times subscriptions that filter money into
Wasn't
it.
Sports Illustrated a month or two ago doing those phony AI stories under made-up names of reporters?
And now it makes sense, right? Like here's a guy, whoever owns this company and dabbles in, any sort of like technology is probably like, how do I save my butt? How do I save my bottom line? Oh, I'll just create AI-generated fake people to put out stories, and then I'll lay people off. Like it's a scare. Listen, I know no one ever feels bad for anybody in the media because most people hate us, but like these are real people with real lives. And real jobs that salaries have gone from being way, like back in the day, if you worked for Sports Illustrated,
it's a good living.
It was a good living. Now, like, I mean, the stories that you hear from people who work for companies that used to be like Sports Illustrated, just to illustrate it, back in the day used to throw a baller party at the Super Bowl. They would get huge acts. The place would be packed with former athletes. Like it was one of the parties you desperately wanted to get into. And now, like their reporters at the Super Bowl aren't even staying at like the NFL sanctioned hotel. They're staying at they're sharing an Airbnb somewhere. Like that's how different of a lifestyle it is.
We only have 30 seconds left, but speaking of the media in general, just not SI, did you read the Columbia Journalism story that was on our packet yesterday? All of California, which has 39 million people in it, there are a grand total of 8 reporters in the whole state who cover Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
The majority of states in this country do not have one reporter who covers Congress or the White House.
I was going to say,
one.
and sports, listen, sports is entertainment at the end of the day, but to not have local journalism,
I'm with you.
It is one of the most important jobs in our country, especially right now.
Nice jacket, by the way. I love that thing. It's really great.
It's just like a,
it's very cozy.
Yeah,
very
it's very cozy and warm on this cold day.
Nice to see you, Treny Casey.
Thank you very very
Bye.
much. We've been talking with Treny Casey. She is the anchor reporter for NBC Sports Boston. She's also a BPR contributor. Thank you very much, Treny. Coming up, our media maven, Sue O'Connell, is here. We're going to talk to her. We're going to mention Taylor Swift to her as well.
Why not?
And a lot of other stuff. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News. Thank you, Eastern Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. On February 13th from 11 to 12, we're going to be joined here at the Boston Public Library by the Mayor of the City of Boston, Michelle Wu. Hey, Jim.
Hey there. And speaking of live guests, by the way, I'm told in the back of the room, the people in the blue hats are striking members of the Newton Teachers Association. Welcome. It's good to see you. And we should say we have invited a representative of the Teachers Association and of Newton City Management to join us tomorrow, whether this thing is resolved or not. And obviously, we hope you resolve things today. And thank you for stopping by, and good luck. Joining us now is local woman and our media maven, Sue O'Connell. She's co-host of NBC 10's Boston at Issue, airing every Sunday at 11:30 following Meet the Press. She hosts every night. Is this true?
No, it was last week.
Oh, that was last week. That's what I thought. In any case, let me say that again.
Say it again.
Every Sunday at 11:30 following Meet the Press. Is that true?
That's true.
That's true. She's Sue O'Connell.
I
Hi,
am.
Sue.
That's
How
true.
are you?
Hi, good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Okay, Sue O'Connell, since we've been asking everybody today, we asked Treny Casey before you, we talked about with the listeners for 20 minutes earlier today, about the conspiracy theories that the Super Bowl is going to be rigged so that Taylor Swift can come out at halftime or even after the game and endorse Joe Biden for president, and that she is a employee of the Pentagon, a PSYOP. I'm not sure what that is exactly, but
you
whatever
had left
it is.
one thing out. Did you see what we read during the break? Also, she'd pardon Hunter Biden.
Yes,
that's the
right.
other thing.
Pardon Hunter Biden
yes.
as well. So what do you make of this
Well,
story?
it's all true, obviously, and I'm sorry it's out. Listen, we just came back from New Hampshire, right?
We did.
We did. And I was out talking to folks and talking to Trump supporters and talking about conspiracies and talking about the things that are happening to Donald Trump. And of course, as all of us who have worked with government people or in government understand, no one is as organized to pull off some of these conspiracies, right? It's just completely impossible. It's above their pay grade to actually get it done. I think someone made the point earlier. If Joe Biden could actually make this happen, he wouldn't even really need to run for president, right? It would just be all done, okay? But the thing that drives me the most crazy about all of these conspiracy theories, and I also want to say your caller who said the problem with Taylor Swift is that now she's powerful, right? You know, before when they thought she was a white supremacist and sending them secret messages, she was great. But now that she actually is a powerful, rich woman who has earned all of her own money, she's a danger to society. These conspiracy theories, especially about the NFL, drive me crazy. There are conspiracies in the NFL right under their noses. Colin Kaepernick is not playing football.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's alleged there was collusion between the owners. Is that not a conspiracy? Right there. What about the players' health? What about their the way their unions are unable to protect them to get them more coverage if they only play for 2 years or so? Is that not a conspiracy right under your nose?
Very
yes,
good.
it is.
Yes,
there are
it is.
hundreds of conspiracies, collusions, and things that are happening in the NFL that none of these people are paying attention to. They're so concerned that Taylor Swift is going to endorse Joe Biden and they're going to have this team win because there's going to be so many more viewers. To Treny's point, it's not like the Super Bowl isn't the most watched thing in the world. It's just, it drives me crazy.
So in other words, it's true and drives you crazy. So let's move on. Techno-optimism. I've never heard the term before, but apparently a bunch of billionaires led, or at least among the leaders, is Bill Ackman, who most of us never heard of until his successful effort to oust Claudine Gay as president of Harvard. Apparently, they are uniting around issues of unfettered free speech, regardless of the consequences, an anti-DEI agenda. And there is some feeling, this is from Axios, this story this morning, there is some feeling that if they don't get what they want from one of the candidates, which they apparently will not, they will put their money and their muscle behind RFK Jr. What do you make of this odd coalition of egomaniacs?
Yeah, so that's a good way to describe them, Jim. And for they're also millionaires and billionaires and very successful individuals in their categories of business. And because of that, and because they have been often in the cutting edge businesses, like there's no argument that Elon Musk has been in the forefront of many things that will soon become true. Some of them won't, like electric cars. They think that they're better than the rest of us and they can see things better than the rest of us. And these are the same people that have been buying up land, I think, in Norway because I think Norway recently passed a law that foreigners can't buy any more land because these guys have been buying land because that's the best place to go.
Is that true or a conspiracy theory?
No, in case of a climate crisis,
Wow.
they have buying land. They have bunkers that they have. They complete homes that they have underneath their own homes to protect them in case of a revolution or an insurrection.
Preppers.
So they are living in a high-end world where they are about to leave us. This is why Elon Musk wants to go to Mars and wants to go to the moon. Why they think you need to have more babies so that their gene pool will be out there. So there's a whole, it's not just about we're going to try and influence the election to pick a candidate who we think believes in the things that we believe in, but they really think that they are trying to build a utopia, at least for themselves, that we will get to buy into to go to. They bought land that they're trying to build a town somewhere.
But other than the tunnels or whatever you were describing a minute ago, what's wrong with what they're doing? I mean, I'm not an RFK Jr. fan. I think it's fairly obvious. But Zuckerberg is trying to elect people that makes him happy. So is Mr. Microsoft, Tim Cook from Apple. All these. I mean, everybody is. So if you got a lot of money and you choose to use that power, unfortunately, you're allowed to exercise much more financial power than I would like, thanks to Citizens United.
Exactly.
But they're not that much different from people on the left,
Yeah,
right?
I'm not against the theory of it. I mean, I completely support their ability to speak and to do that. And I think in many ways, some of the conversations they have will forward humanity. Some of it will not be great. The problem is just that they don't talk to real people. Right. I think the biggest problem that they have, which everyone has as you climb up the elitist ladder, or if you're born at the top of the elitist ladder, is that they're not talking to the real people who are actually going to have to live with the ideas that they are trying to get rid of or trying to put forward. This DEI issue, Mark Cuban has been great on Twitter.
Owner of the Dallas Mavericks.
Arguing with these folks. He has an ongoing dialogue with them, expressing that, skills-based hiring, which Governor Maura Healey has also started to institute in the state, meaning you don't have to have a degree, you just have to prove that you can do the work, that you have the skills to do it. And he's saying, if I want to have a company that represents America, I want to make sure I have a company that represents America, and that's where DEI comes in handy.
We haven't talked at all. I guess we're waiting for the governor to join us in February. That was dropped out of nowhere the other day.
Deal.
And it's such an enlightened position. Could you describe it just to drop more?
The best of my ability. The challenge I think we all went through at some point is there were jobs that you had to have a college degree to be able to do.
Right,
and then at some point, I think when I started graduating in 1984, you just required...
Started graduating.
It took a while.
Most of us either just graduated or didn't, if you know what I mean.
I was one credit short because I had... It's a long story.
Is that a true story?
Yeah, it was my fault.
Okay.
Anyway.
How long did that go on for?
It went on for 6 months.
Okay, go ahead.
Anyway, but I needed to have a college degree to get the job that I had. But it turns out I didn't really need a college degree. I could have had a 2-year degree, or I could have had internships that proved that I did it. So Maura Healey, and again, I haven't read this before I brought it up in detail, is saying if you can do the job.
If you have the skill set to do the job.
You don't need a college degree.
I love that.
And you know what else is really annoying? That a lot of these professions now, it's not just a college degree, it's a master's degree.
Right.
Social workers, they want master's degree. Teachers, they want social. What are you supposed to pay for all this? You're supposed to pay 4 years of education and then 2 more years of master's degree?
Is there an argument against... This sounds like such an enlightened and obvious idea to me. Is there an argument against this?
Well, of course, someone is saying that it's dumbing down, as if everybody who gets a college degree is, no offense, teachers, as if everyone who gets a college degree is automatically smart. I mean, it's about can you demonstrate to do the work. It's not dumbing it down. And it also,
But she's also not saying if you do need a degree for a certain job, you don't have to have it.
But at the same time, you can also now go to the community colleges in the state. For Boston high school students, they can go for free. For some of them can, and for people over 25, you can now go to community colleges. So there's plenty of opportunity for education's sake, education for work's sake, education for work and education's sake, and not going at all and just getting a job and saving the money.
You know what that policy is? A Biden plot. That's what I would have to
Wait a
say.
minute, Taylor Swift's on the phone. Hold on.
Now, you are a big true crime person,
I
are
am
you
indeed,
not?
yes.
And a handful of people in this audience may not know who Gypsy Rose Blanchard is. We have a little sound. We'll play some sound in a minute.
Story.
Could you describe? It's really a painful story,
Yeah, it is.
but can you describe the gist of it to us?
Yes, there's a mental illness called Munchausen, and Munchausen by proxy, and it's when you make yourself or make someone else sick to get the attention. And I've actually been through this because my kid had so many undiagnosed chronic illnesses at one point. I made sure, because of this case, that I went to the same hospital and had all of the doctor's notes and reports in the same report so that they wouldn't pull me aside and go, "Are you sure your kid is really sick and it's not you?"
Oh my God.
So in this case, this poor girl was being made ill, seriously ill, by her mother.
Yep.
And was going from doctor shopping around, raising money, getting, Make-A-Wish, going to Disney, and it turns out the young girl wasn't really sick at all, and she ended up, unfortunately, with a boyfriend she met online, of course, murdering her mother and going to jail for it. She was found guilty.
The boyfriend murdered the mother.
Yeah, and she was found manslaughter, I think it was.
So, and did 7 years and just got out.
So there's been a true crime series, of course, on it. There was a movie, I think it was a Netflix movie that was out a little while ago. And now she is out and is being celebrated on social media. And the mix here of the line between, and I talk to a lot of podcasts. I do a segment called Listen to This on NECN. And every time I talk to a true crime podcaster, I say, where's the line between the entertainment that we are all consuming and have been consuming and the tragedy? And, everybody in these stories is going through some sort of tragedy. One person said to me, I'm pretty sure that cave painting was a tragedy that we all like to look at now, but they try to be sensitive to it. But now we actually have these videos and cameras and Instagram accounts of the people who are involved in the series.
So it's not just Gypsy Rose Blanchard is the point.
Right, it's all of them.
Yeah, we have a little sound from her for people who haven't heard her life, talking about her life after prison on The View, actually, earlier this month.
I have to prioritize myself in this moment. I just got released from prison after 8.5 years, and then I didn't have a life before that. So I have a lot to process and go through right now.
How old are you now, if I may ask?
I'm 32, actually.
Okay. You know what's interesting about this case to me is I was asking Marjorie before, Pamela Smart, obviously, right to our north. Pamela Smart had a teen
persuaded
lover, was lover, right? Wasn't it? Yeah, kill her husband, right? Mm-hmm. The actual killer, got out of prison relatively quickly, and I believe Pamela Smart is doing life in prison, is she not?
I believe so.
This is almost the opposite.
Right.
Gypsy Rose Blanchard finds somebody to kill her mother. The guy who killed her mother is doing life in prison, and she's out after 8.5 years. It's sort of exactly a 180.
Right.
And what's that about?
Well, I mean, I think that it's hard to look at this case and not think that she is more innocent than she is guilty. The daughter.
I could not agree more.
He also, from the kid who did the murder, obviously in a diminished capacity.
Was this a mercenary thing?
No, she met him.
Boyfriend kind of thing.
She couldn't get a phone. She had to sneak a phone. She, was actually growing up and didn't realize, her mother kept infantilizing. What's the word?
Infantilizing.
You.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And she never really matured in any way, and found this guy online who was also of diminished capacity, and then went out and snuck around, and they came up with this idea that they were going to kill her, the mother, so that they could run away together. And of course, they kill her and they run to this corner diner. I mean, this is what we're dealing with here.
I can't restrain myself here, having spent every day in the courtroom during the Pamela Smart trial.
Okay.
You were
in New Hampshire. Yes.
I didn't know that.
And I'll never forget the kid, the boy that actually shot her husband. His name was Billy Flynn. He was 15 years old when he got involved with her. I think he was 16 when he killed her. But I remember he got in the witness stand, and I was killed her husband, right? Yeah. And the coldness of Pamela Smart, I think, was part of it. She said, now please, put the dog in the basement so the dog is not traumatized by this, and make sure you don't get any blood in the rug, because I have a lot of white rugs. And this Billy Flynn takes the witness stand, and he comes across as such a messed up, twisted kid. Greg Smart, the parents, they felt bad for this young man. And he did spend about 20 years in jail. It wasn't just a little bit of time.
The parents of the guy who was murdered, the husband, felt bad for the shooter, for the killer?
Yes, because he was very young. She was on him. He was kind of in a sexual frenzy. She's sending
How old was she when he was 15 and doing this?
I think she was in her mid-20s.
Yeah,
mid-20s. She was a media instructor or something.
Yeah.
And, he obviously did it. But the details of the case where he said, God forgive me, shoots the kid in the back of the head. I mean, the whole thing was just... you could see where the power was there.
No, what do you make of your true crime obsession, can I call it? Is that too strong?
No, I don't know if it's an obsession. I'll tell you what I like about true crime is the storytelling. You know, I really enjoy if it's done well. I don't like just the recitation of the facts or what happened, but when they're laying out a really good podcast, and even the TV ones that they just put on podcasts, just laying out how it happens. I'm also amazed at how stupid people are. I mean, it just continues to amaze me that people do stupid things.
You know, with the one that was a huge sensation, the very first Serial podcast, that was about 8 years ago, where they thought that the boyfriend who had killed the high school girl,
Serial,
right.
Exactly. I remember thinking to myself, I don't know if he killed her or not, but I remember thinking, this poor girl's parents are watching the death of their teenager become this sensation around the country, with people basically taking the side of the guy that was convicted of killing her. So I don't know.
Well, it's hard. I mean, it's also, I love to watch shows with my brother, who's a retired Boston police officer of, 35 years. There was, I don't even remember what the HBO one that was on, but you watch it with them and you're going, oh, that poor guy. He's like, just wait, just wait. Or, oh my God, they're beating that, that confession out of him, not literally. It's like, just wait. So, it's really, it's just storytelling to me, and it's also the human condition.
We're talking to local woman Sue O'Connell.
Okay, where are we going next here?
Well, can we do something light for a couple of...
Sure.
Well, it's not that light, depending on... How do you feel? I'm really worked into a frenzy over this. Is the disappearance, or we're in the process of experiencing the disappearance of ad-free streaming. What are you laughing about? It's horrible.
I'm laughing because every young person in my life over the past year and a half has said to me, why can't we just have all of our favorite stations in one place that we can watch it? And I go, yes, it used to be called cable, right? It used to be called cable. You would buy a bundle and you could watch your shows, and it would be on the TV, and that was just one bill you had to pay. Or my other favorite thing, we have, in the industry, it's called FAST, our FAST channels. And people have had a hard time understanding what a FAST channel is.
Well, I'm sort of in the industry. What's a FAST channel?
It's free ad-supported television, or as we used to call it,
television.
TV.
Exactly.
And how podcasts, or as we used to call it, radio. So we are in this world where everything that we used to do that we got rid of because it was too expensive or too complicated is being pulled back and being, put in demand. And I have to tell you that not one person who is in charge of these things at NBC, at CBS, at ABC, at HBO know what the future is, because it's all very fragmented and very confusing. But people are watching stuff. They're just not watching it in the same way. The concern is it's hard to count it. I think more people watch me on our FAST channel up in New Hampshire. When we were doing our coverage on primary night, I had friends who lived like a mile and a half away from the TV station, NBC 10. They moved to Palm Springs. They never watched me on TV. And they're texting me from Palm Springs that we're watching you on Peacock. So we don't really know what the future is, but prices will dictate it, and advertisers will dictate it.
Do you pay the $3 a month or whatever it is so you don't have to do ads?
No, I don't mind ads.
I can't stand it. It ruins the whole flow. You don't care about this, obviously.
Well, I'm interested in the TikTok story because I'm interested in Bill McKibben.
Just want to tell you what my mom used to say whenever I would complain about ads. She would say, somebody has to pay for this.
Beautifully put.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love the fact that these
TikTok... You are paying. Is that tell your mother if she was around to be told.
Well, you go to movie theaters, and then they start showing you other ads.
Marjorie wants to talk TikTok.
Remember we were talking with Bill McKibben about this huge liquefied natural gas project.
Oh, sure, the thing in Louisiana.
Yes, and he said it was if Biden approved this, it was going to be a total disaster, and he was going to stage a protest. And Bill McKibben, of course, we're lucky enough to have him on once a month, something like that. One of the premier, if not the premier, environmentalists in America. Well, apparently, a TikTok influencer gets his newsletter on Substack, or maybe they read him out in the New Yorker. No, I think it was his newsletter. Anyway, they heard about this from Bill McKibben, and kind of launched this video. And it kind of took off on TikTok, and Biden, just a couple of days ago, put a hold on making the decision, and there's a lot of speculation this has to do with this TikTok campaign.
Yeah, the Democrats and the Biden campaign are paying a lot of attention to TikTok and to the influencers on TikTok. And as much as there is an enormous tidal wave of dis and misinformation on all the social media platforms. I'm lucky enough, I have a young adult, a kid who comes to me and says, is this true? Is this true? Is this true? And I have to go through horrific videos and say, no, that's a horrible video from 20 years ago. But there's also a lot of activism on all sides that's happening on TikTok that's really involving people. And even though I think the Biden campaign and the Biden administration are a little concerned, especially around some of the criticism they're getting about what they're doing or not doing in Gaza, I think that an involved younger generation is good for us in this way. And I also know the Biden administration is working, Taylor Swift conspiracy theories aside, really engaging with TikTok and social media as soon as this campaign turns into it, which could be next week, a general election.
So maybe you can explain. I mentioned this number that I saw on CNN earlier this morning. 18 to 29-year-olds in 2020, Joe Biden won them by 24%. He now leads by 2%, right? Which means it's basically a dead heat with Donald Trump. It's not just 18 and 29-year-olds saying, I'm sitting home because you've abandoned us on climate or on the Middle East. It's 18 and 29-year-olds, obviously, in very large numbers, saying Donald Trump is a suitable alternative. Explain to me what an 18 and 29-year-old says to him or herself that causes them to think that on Joe Biden's worst day, Donald Trump is preferable.
Yeah, I think the problem that we have, I think adults have, is that we forget about when we turned on, like when we engaged, right? And we look at these, say, a 22-year-old, and you think, can't the 22-year-old see all of the terrible things that Donald Trump did? And can't they see all of the things that Joe Biden has done? And there's been some great reporting on they're entering into the Israel-Hamas war, Palestinian-Gaza world, and tuning in right now, and they don't have the historic information or the context. And I think what's happening with the Biden-Trump race as it is right now is they are entering the conversation with a limited set of facts that...
Historical facts.
Yeah, well, no, just current facts. Like,
well, do they not know that the alternative is a rapist?
No, they may not, and that's
they don't
what
believe it. They think it's a witch hunt, just like
18 and 29-year-olds do too.
But what the Biden campaign has to do, this is when this general election starts, which we can argue it already has, but when Biden rings the bell and he's running against Trump, you're going to see a multi-level, multimedia platform attack basically on Trump, saying this is who he is in every single demographic to educate them. So I wouldn't, obviously those numbers are not great for the Biden campaign by any means, but I don't think that it's where it ends.
Well, we were talking with Charlie Sennett about Israel and Gaza yesterday, and On the Media, which is one of my favorite podcasts. It's on. We run it every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. Talked about how in Israel, the Israelis are not getting the facts of what's going on in Gaza because there's been a lot of censorship, and their far right-wing station, which is basically a propaganda order station for Netanyahu, similar to Fox for Trump, may show the destruction in Gaza, but they're not showing the horrific scenes that we are seeing in the United States of children and talking about starvation and all these things. So we are not unique in the United States of America, and that's part of the reason why we're seeing this authoritarian rise in countries around the world, because of propaganda coming from news stations.
I also think it's a gender split with the young adults too. I think it's more male are looking at Trump, and more females are looking at Biden.
That's the pro-rapist vote? Is that what that is? Okay. It's really sick.
Yeah, but people, as we've said a million times, it is really difficult to prevail in sexual assault crimes because
But she did.
Routinely,
But she did.
It doesn't matter to a lot of people. She's a liar. She
so
made
the
it up
finding
to
means
get booked.
nothing to them.
I think some people think the court system is rigged.
Hey, but
go
she's
after
80,
Donald.
and that's a good thing, because you know how I'm for 80-year-olds.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a little while with a woman that was in the courtroom covering the trial.
Jessica Bennett from the New York Times.
About the fact that an 80-year-old prevailed, and I'm very happy about it. Anyway, we've been speaking, meanwhile, with local woman Sue O'Connell.
Oh, I meant Taylor Swift's on the phone again. Hold on.
Oh, Taylor Swift. Okay, tell her we said hello.
She keeps calling.
Our media maven, Sue O'Connell, she's co-host of NBC 10 Boston's At Issue, airs every Sunday at 11:30, following Meet the Press, and hosts every night.
No, that's gone.
Oh.
That was last week.
Okay. That's last week. Okay, cross that out, Marjorie.
On the air.
Okay, what are you doing over there in NBC 10? Why don't you tell us, since I got it wrong?
Well, I'll be on at 4:30 today, talking about Israel and Biden. And then on Sundays, we have after Meet the Press, and then we have our podcast, Taking Issue, which you can get wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Sue.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Coming up
Sue
after a
O'Connell.
quick break, we're going to talk to Boston Medical Center's Dr. Catherine Gergen-Barnett about the impact of the Stewart Hospital's financial programs on the hospital she works at. That's Boston Medical Center. Of course, measles outbreaks, a bunch of other stuff. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at YouTube/GBH News and Facebook.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming at Facebook.com/GBH News, YouTube.com/GBH News. Mayor Wu will join us here at the library February 13th from 11 to 12. We hope you do too. We're joined now at the library by Dr. Catherine Gergen-Barnett, Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation at Boston Medical Center, Associate Professor at BU Medical School, and an Aspen Institute Health Innovators Fellow. Hello there, Doctor. Nice to see you.
Wonderful to see you both.
Well, yesterday we talked with Michael Curry, who runs the Mass Health network, not Mass Health, the community health centers around the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Yes, about the financial problems of Stewart Healthcare, which runs a lot of hospitals. So, speaking in a general way, what does this mean for healthcare that these hospital systems can be so precarious, and it's also a profit organization as opposed to a nonprofit organization?
Yeah, I actually think Michael Curry did a terrific job addressing some of it. I think the fact that Stewart has 33 hospitals and 8 of which are in Massachusetts, you know, I think first and foremost as a primary care physician, I think about the patients who are not going to have access. I think Stewart is very similar to BMC in terms of the patients it serves. So
a lot of poor people.
A lot of people who are living under the poverty level, who already have a difficulty accessing medical care. And so there are going to be a lot of people that are in precipitous places not being able to access care, and a lot of very needed healthcare providers who are not going to be necessarily quickly absorbed into jobs. So I think the fact that we are in a place where, you know, as we're increasingly seeing for-profit institutions taking over healthcare versus nonprofit, I think it leaves us in difficult situations when finance plays a role, and a huge role, in the way that people can get their care.
And they're taking over, I'm sorry, I was just going to say, they're taking over private practices of physicians and dentists as well. And you know, I was just talking to my own dentist a couple of weeks ago. These often do not work out well for the healthcare for the patients or the physicians involved.
Yeah, I think Michael Curry also quoted this. There's a really important Stat News article that came out recently showing, again, when you have a lot of for-profit companies coming into the state of Massachusetts, it doesn't drive down costs and it doesn't improve outcomes. So, you know, how are we going to work collectively on policy in terms of what's allowed, in terms of, you know, how we're delivering care to the people of Massachusetts and nationally?
You know, the last thing about this, he also recommended, this is Curry, that we read something that Paul Haddis, doctor, and John McDonough, former state rep who was chair of the healthcare committee, was very involved with Ted Kennedy's effort on the national level around healthcare. That's worked for Ted Kennedy after he left the legislature. It's called Some Thoughts on How to Deal with the Steward Situation in Commonwealth Beacon. And in the first paragraph, they mentioned the Steward, nationally in August of 2022, almost 2 years ago, showed a negative net worth of $1.5 billion. And while I know the number one issue is what happens now to patients in need and soon to be patients in need, the secondary issue is who the hell was watching the chicken coop here?
Right.
I mean, the Attorney General's office, then under Attorney General Healy, and I'm sure we'll speak to her
Yes.
about it when she comes in as
Yep.
governor, oversees the healthcare system. And how can a system that nationally is bleeding $1.5 billion almost 2 years ago not get the kind of scrutiny that would let us know that the whole thing may go belly up in early 2024?
Yeah, well, we've always had terrific people at the helm, and I know these conversations are going to be very much underway in terms of the future of this scrutiny and how we watch, in your words, the chicken coop.
Are you worried about getting drowned? Not that you're not already at Boylston Medical
We're
Center?
always ready for the ebbs and flows of patient care,
It's a
and we're
very
well aware.
positive attitude, I should
Yes.
say. We're talking to Catherine Gergen-Barnett.
So I know you wanted to talk about this very upsetting rise in rates of cervical cancer. At the same time, there is this vaccine
Yes.
that, as I recall, was quite controversial when it came out. So talk about the rise in the vaccine both.
Yeah, well, I actually really, I felt it was a really important topic for us to address today, because today is actually the second to last day in January. So many people may not know January is Cervical Cancer Awareness Month.
Did not know that.
So this is an important kind of call out to everybody. Cervical cancer used to be one of the number one killers in women. And then just for a very quick history lesson, in the 1920s, there was a scientist, Greek scientist, with the last name Papanikolaou, so you'll sort of recognize that, who was the first to recognize these abnormal cells causing cervical cancer and first to develop some of the tests, the PAP as what we know it now, which now, not until the 1950s and 60s did we start to routinely do it. So that's actually pretty recent. And just to call sort of a very pointed fact around it, it's not that cervical cancer has increased for all ages. Actually, we've done an amazing job in terms of decreasing cervical cancer rates. And actually, we've decreased the rates of cervical cancer between regular screening, between pap smears and the HPV vaccine, which I'll talk about in a moment, by almost 70%.
Wow.
But those rates are most effectively reduced in the young people. So the increase in cervical cancer that we're seeing just over the last 10 years is people greater than 30. Okay, so why
Who missed the
is
entry
that?
of the vaccine? Is that what it was about?
So part of it is they missed the entry to the vaccine, and I'll get to those age cutoffs. Part of it is absolutely going back to COVID-19 pandemic shutdowns, people not coming in for PAPs, not necessarily following up on abnormal PAPs, healthcare systems being overwhelmed, I think probably not doing necessarily all the tracking, and then really importantly, let's talk about the vaccine, because not as much uptake in certain groups. So HPV vaccine has actually been around for a number of years, and it is recommended for really actually people, boys and girls as young as 9 years of age. We routinely start to talk to people at 11. By the way, it used to just be offered to young girls.
Yep.
And it was like, why are we just doing this for girls? Like, it takes two to, tango for some of these things. Obviously not in all cases, but happily it's now covered for boys and girls. And you need 2 doses if you get it before 15. And it's 95% effective in reducing any kind of transmission of HPV. So HPV is the virus that most often causes cervical cancer. It also causes anal cancer, and it causes throat cancer. So these are really 3 huge killers. And the HPV vaccine can reduce that by almost 100%. And the last thing I'll say about this is there was actually a British journal article that showed that people who have been fully vaccinated against HPV 100% of the time do not get the cancer that's associated with HPV. So, like, what kind of vaccine do we have that is that effective? Well, very few.
One of the things I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that there were people that were like very, very religious, and my children are not going to have sex until their wedding night, so they don't need to get any vaccine. That I remember when I was writing about this back at the Herald, that there was this kind of ridiculous, I think, attitude on the part of some parents.
Well, I think that it's also been about communication coming from physicians. So I actually think the way that physicians and healthcare providers need to be talking to families about it, which is the truth, is that this is a vaccine that prevents cancer.
Right.
Right? Because actually most sexually active people will be exposed to HPV in their lifetime. Almost 100%. So if we want to talk about reducing cancer, we actually have, Biden's got this big cancer moonshot right now. We have a chance of eradicating cervical cancer through the HPV vaccine. And it's safe and it's effective and it's not about being sexually promiscuous, and we have to debunk that myth.
But that preceded COVID. Isn't the issue now? I mean, you may have touched on this.
Yeah.
It's the anti-vax thing from COVID trickling down. I mean, we have a story that the increase in measles in Europe is 45-fold. We talked to Art Kaplan a few weeks ago. I think it was only 8 cases in Philadelphia, but theoretically it had been eradicated here. It's because people are still in this anti-vax sick mode. Is that not part of the problem?
It is absolutely part of the puzzle. Again, part of it is also about lack of access and the fact that people have had a really hard time coming in to get routine healthcare maintenance. And we know for kids, for routine vaccines, we at Boston Medical Center, we've had vans go out and give vaccines. And I know there's been a lot of creativity, and happily now there's, coordination with places like CVS and Walgreens to do these vaccines, but it is part of the lost arc, I think, of healthcare delivery that's happened over the last 4 years.
Almost nobody's getting the booster. I mean, we've talked about it's under 20%,
we have absolutely
isn't it?
talked about it, and 11% for kids.
11% for kids.
Yep.
You know what the other thing we often talk about with art is that more and more people are seeking religious exemptions before they go to school. And as he points out,
What religion?
there's no religion that was established, unless you're something about something in the last 10 years, that was, the vaccines weren't around when Judaism, Islam and Christianity were formed. So, and even Christian scientists who are generally not into getting these medical interventions can make, conscious exceptions and stuff. I don't understand why we still have a religious exemption. Why? Because, I mentioned this before, we had a massive chickenpox outbreak at my kids' school a few years ago, and it was because these parents hadn't vaccinated their kids for chickenpox.
Well, we definitely see it on the West Coast too, where there's large cohorts of religious exemption, and we see it in very Orthodox Jewish communities. So, I'm not a school administrator, but I do think that the level of rise of religious exemptions and sort of the wiggle room that has been provided leaves us in public health in a really dangerous spot. Because, same thing for, going back to this measles question, right? So, even though it seems like if you actually look at the vaccination rate for measles, it's still like 91%. You need 95% of people vaccinated to stop a spread. That is what's called, this may kind of raise old feelings of this idea of herd immunity. But this is actually, for measles, we really, and other contagious diseases like measles, we need to have that rate of vaccination in schools to prevent an outbreak. And measles is not just a rash and a high fever.
Oh, you get pretty sick.
I mean, you actually can get meningitis, you can start to get seizures, and you can go blind. Like, these are not things to mess around with.
Can we spend? I'm sorry, go ahead.
And one of the things they said in this story is that a good number of the people that have suffered from measles in this European outbreak are little kids.
Yes,
who
of course.
maybe got it from their older siblings or something like that.
Yeah, and then again, that's partly because they didn't get the vaccine in time, because they really need to get it around 1 year of age. And so those kids are, they were born in the pandemic.
Do you find a lot of people are afraid of vaccines in your practice? Do people talk about their nerves about it?
I will say yes, that I have a lot of conversations, and I do think the biggest role in shared decision making around vaccines is trust. Having a relationship of trust where you can ask your questions and you can trust your provider.
You know what's amazing? When you list all of the crimes and sins of Donald Trump, one of the ones that is never mentioned at all is the fact that probably hundreds of thousands of people died because of his absolute lack of leadership on the issue. And it's ancient history. And I'll tell you, if I was one of those families, it wouldn't be ancient history. A potential positive note amidst this sea of crap. The sign-ups for Obamacare are exploding.
Yes.
That's the good news. The doubly good news is it's happening at the highest rate in the states where the sadistic Republican governors refuse to accept expansion of Medicaid, which basically means the federal government would pay to cover low-income people in their states, but they have an ideological opposition, so screw the health of the poor people in the state. Those people are signing up for Obamacare, but they're signing up in these numbers in great part because of the record-level subsidies, which I was not aware, I'm embarrassed to say, until I was reading in anticipation of you coming till tonight, expire in 2025. So it is not an exaggeration to say that the success of Obamacare, of reaching people on the margins, may be on the ballot in November of 2024.
Yeah, it's a critical issue for 2024. The subsidies will expire at the end of 2025, so in 2026. But you are correct, 21 million people have signed up for ACA, and we've had 80% increase of people signing up since 2021. And to your point, a lot of this is happening in places that are quote unquote, red states, where I think it was 4.2 million people in Texas have signed up for 2024, and it just goes down. Florida, huge
number
rates.
in Florida,
And actually what's really interesting to me is that this idea of ACA, so they don't talk about Obamacare in red states, right? But the idea of Affordable Care Act has actually become so integrated into people's lives that there's a huge amount of Republicans, and folks who traditionally vote Republican, who are now very supportive of ACA. You read Donald Trump and his tweets and his information pulling, and then he still very much talks about wanting to, repeal and replace.
Because he's working on a plan, he said last week. He's been working on the plan, I think, for roughly 8 years.
Yeah. The fact is we know, especially now that there's, people coming off the Medicaid rolls in record numbers since April 1st of last year, when the emergency, was over for COVID-19, that we have so many people who are still uninsured, right? And so ultimately that will drive up our healthcare costs a huge amount and obviously cause increased mortality and morbidity in our country. The ACA, is a way to cover folks. And I don't know what's going to happen when, 2024 comes on the ballot.
What do you do? We discussed this with Michael Curry yesterday, is not just the loss of or the inaccessibility of certain critical benefits, but the anxiety about the potential loss. People are going to start reading in late in 2024 and 2025 that these increased subsidies may disappear. People are reading now, my hospital in Norwood or Brockton, my Stewart Hospital, may close, may not be bought. How do you, as a physician, when a patient comes to you and broaches something like that? Here's what's wrong with me today, Dr. Gergen Barnett, but here's what I think is going to be wrong with me tomorrow. I may not have my hospital. I may not have my Obamacare subsidy. What do you say to a person to calm their anxiety?
Well, first of all, working in a place like Boston Medical Center, which is a safety net hospital, we can ensure people to have coverage under Mass Health. And if they don't have coverage, we basically just send them and they get it that day, and then they come and see me. So, but I do think that we're living in a time of great anxiety because of all of the unknowns, right? We wouldn't have necessarily known that 21 million people would be signing up for the ACA. So I think I would say, yes, go out and vote, use your feet, say what's important to you, and we also recognize that things happen really quickly, and continue to advocate for yourself and see how
But
you
you can't assure
coverage.
me that my sister in Brockton is not going to be without a hospital 6 months from now, can you, Doctor?
I cannot ensure you that. No.
Here's a quick question from a texter wanting to know, are childhood measles vaccines for adults effective years later in light of the recent uptake?
Yes, so if you're concerned at all, first of all, there's a really easy blood test we can do to check whether or not you have antibodies to measles, mumps, and rubella. That's that vaccine that you traditionally get. So when I have women who are coming to me who are pregnant, I always check to make sure they have immunity to it. And you can get vaccinated if you're older to those things.
I thought they lasted a lifetime.
No, they don't. They slowly decline.
Okay.
And what's complicated is each of the measles, the mumps, and the rubella decline at different rates.
Oh, okay.
But they are slow decliners. So if you've been vaccinated as a kid, you're good.
Okay.
But if you have any worries, go ask your primary care doctor, whoever you're seeing, to test you for the antibodies and have a conversation.
Isn't that amazing that they can last you your lifetime? It's amazing.
Vaccines are amazing.
Yeah.
Can I give you one last amazing thing
What?
that you've never told us about, and I blame you for this?
Oh, yes.
When I came back from New Hampshire, I thought I might have COVID. I wasn't feeling so hot last week, and I went to my doctor at Mount Auburn Hospital. I learned about a swab that I did not know existed.
Oh, yes?
A single swab of PCR quality, it's PCR, right?
Yes.
Quality, that can tell whether you have COVID, the flu, or RSV all in once.
It's not a home test, Jim.
No, I know it's not. I know it's not, but it's unbelievable.
It is. It's the best.
And an hour later, I got the results.
It is quite, yes.
So why didn't you tell me about this?
I'm really sorry you never asked. I'm glad that you didn't have
I am,
COVID,
like, in
and you
awe.
look like $1 million.
I feel
so
fabulous.
clearly
Thank
that
you.
swab worked.
Doctor, it's great to see
Thank
you.
you
Be well.
so
Dr.
much
Catherine Gergen-Barnett.
for all that information.
Thank
We've been
you.
speaking with
Thank
Dr.
you.
Catherine Gergen-Barnett. We're very grateful that she comes and talks to us from time to time. She's Vice Chair of Primary
time
Care
to time.
Innovation. Well, she does.
She does.
I think it's once a month, isn't it?
Whenever it is.
Whenever it
It's
is.
Not often enough.
But she's a fountain of information
She
here.
is.
She's a Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation at Boston Medical Center, Associate Professor at Boston University Medical School, and an Aspen Institute Health Innovators Fellow. Okay. Coming up after a short break, Jessica Bennett, contributing editor for the opinion section of the New York Times, joins us on the latest Jean Carroll win against Trump. She's got great columns about Carroll, and she was also in the courtroom during the Carroll versus Donald Trump. That's right. She was in the room where it happened, Jim. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live from the library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. The Mayor Wu, will join us February 13th for an hour of Ask the Mayor right here at the Boston Public Library, 11 to noon. When E. Jean Carroll was preparing for a defamation trial against Trump, she said she was terrified of facing him. But once she looked at him in the courtroom last week, all that changed. Here she is describing that to CNN.
There he was. And he was nothing. He was just no power. He was zero. I was flabbergasted.
Did you make eye contact with him?
Many times.
And what was that like?
He's an emperor without clothes. It's like looking at nothing. It was like nothing.
Soundbite of the year so far. Joining us now on Zoom is Jessica Bennett. She's contributing editor for the opinion section of the New York Times, teaches journalism at NYU, and is the author of Feminist Fight Club, and This Is 18. She was in the courtroom for the E. Jean Carroll cases and just wrote a spectacular piece in the New York Times, The Audacity of E. Jean Carroll. Jessica, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I love the audacity of E. Jean Carroll and the idea of an 80-year-old woman getting her due. That was great. But before we get to that, you were in the courtroom. So what was it like?
It's so funny to hear E. Jean's words that you just played, calling Trump nothing, because it's as if the tables have completely turned. You know, he was in the courtroom. Every reporter there was monitoring and watching his every little move. How he was muttering under his breath when he was shaking his head, and at one point he pounded his fists on the table. And yet, E. Jean, through all of this, came off as completely unafraid, fearless, poised, like her voice never cracked when she was speaking. And so to hear her say that she made eye contact with this man after not, being in the same room as him in almost 30 years, is really, really fascinating. And to think of him, who has been on the attack, tweeting, or the Truth Social version of tweeting, from the courtroom during the trial, continuing to repeat the now defamatory lies about her. You can just imagine him kind of sitting on his hands, frothing at the mouth, trying not to insult her again. And he has been insulting her, of course, but he has not repeated the defamatory statements.
It's amazing what 83 million in damages does, even to
Right?
Donald Trump, isn't it?
Yeah. I know.
Before we get to your basic thesis, which Marjorie touched upon a second there, Jessica, I am embarrassed to say I am among the people who you were referring to in the beginning of your piece who did think that E. Jean Carroll's career had primarily been as an extraordinary advice columnist and was not aware of the richness of her career. Could you share that with people just for a couple of seconds, if you would?
Yeah, I think you're not alone. When I first met E. Jean Carroll, it was 3 days after she first had come forward with her accusation in 2019. And I was not familiar with her work. I didn't read Elle. I didn't even know much about her advice column. And it was only through spending time with her and hearing her fantastical, really incredible stories that I learned, oh, wow, this woman had been a gonzo journalist in the 80s at a time when very few women were doing that. She wrote a biography of Hunter S. Thompson, and at one point, an article in the New York Times in the 80s actually called her feminism's answer to Hunter Thompson. She was writing for Playboy, for Esquire, for Rolling Stone. She was traveling to Bahrain. She went to Papua New Guinea and hiked through the mountains alone in search of the primitive man. She was doing all of this kind of sometimes dangerous and really exciting stunt journalism at a time when women weren't doing it. And I think that somehow in the coverage of this case over the years, she has been a little bit reduced to advice columnists and romantic advice columnists, largely, which, also very respectable, but very different from being a serious journalist traveling the world, writing major feature stories and cover stories for these magazines at the height of their influence.
Isn't it amazing that it took a couple of decades in a Manhattan courtroom for her actually to find the primitive man? It's just, it's amazing that event. Thank you very much. Talking to Jessica Bennett from the New York Times.
Well, as you also point out at the end of your column, she was also reduced by people who don't like her into a quote-unquote deranged old hag. And there's so much disrespect for older women in the United States. I love the fact that she, at 80, as you point out, was able to say, you know, she has a reputation. She has something that her life is not over, and she's valued at that age. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, you know, so I was sitting in that courtroom along with everyone else, and I, at one point, wrote down in my notebook, what is the value of an 80-year-old woman's reputation? Because her lawyers were essentially trying to argue, and they were arguing on multiple levels, but one of the points was that she still has worth. She has reputational worth as a public figure, but she also has monetary worth as a professional. And trust and reliability is what any journalist, as you know, needs to be successful in their career. And yet we don't think of 80-year-olds as really having much of a career. I mean, I think we presume that most 80-year-olds are retired, or in her case, I think there was this presumption that she should have been kind of sitting at home knitting with her dogs. But she's actually still working. You know, she was fired from Elle in 2019, shortly after she came forward. And she moved her column to Substack, where she had to rebuild her fan base from scratch, essentially. But over the last few years, she's done that. And as they revealed in court, she's actually making more money now from her Substack than she was when she was fired from Elle in 2019. Certainly...
Oh, go ahead.
No, certainly this woman still has professional value.
You know, I wondered, what did Elle say for the reason that they fired her in 2019, right after these charges were made?
Yeah, so I reported on this at the time, and, you know, it's complicated. They said they were making cuts. And, of course, we know media has gone through major cuts. Like, it is, of course, true that a person in 2019 would not be making what they would have made 10 years prior, and she'd been at Elle for 26 years. So they talked about media contractions and, you know, financially needing to make cuts. But she was making the point that, well, wasn't it sort of coincidental that this happened right after she came forward? But I think it's probably more complex.
You know, Jessica Bennett, Marjorie and I have been lucky enough in our career on the radio and on television to have spent a lot of time with survivors of sexual violence from priests and others in the Catholic Church here. And I can't tell you how many times after we had a survivor on with us, we'd get a call or an email the next day saying, I didn't have the courage to come forward, but I saw John Doe or Jane Doe with you yesterday and everything changed. Do you think at all about what the trickle-down impact of Carroll's strength and willingness to come forward and confront Donald Trump is going to have for other, particularly older women in this country?
Yeah, I mean, you know, as I wrote in the piece, she was of a different generation. She was of the silent generation. Yeah. They were taught to just kind of brush this kind of thing off. She knew that she couldn't go to the police because they probably wouldn't believe her. There was a really lengthy exchange in the first trial about why she didn't scream when Donald Trump was attacking her. And then later, why and how she could have possibly laughed about it when she called to tell her friend. And, you know, these are trauma reactions in a lot of ways, but also she didn't want to make a scene. And I think that is so indicative of the contortions that women sometimes have to put themselves through to maintain composure and not be seen as outside the norm. So if the emails I'm getting from just this column that published yesterday are any indication from many older women saying, oh my gosh, I didn't have the courage to come forward like E. Jean did, I think you're right that it has inspired many people. I think the challenge, of course, is statute of limitations. You know, I didn't know until I was reporting on this that it really was so unprecedented for someone like E. Jean at age 80 to come forward and to publicly testify. And I think that is very rare for older people.
Didn't you write that she also didn't even like using the word rape to describe what happened to her at the time?
Yeah, she uses the word fight because she fought back. And the first time I met her, you know, I asked her about it and she said the word rape, but she whispered it to me across the table. And I think that tells you a bit of something about where she was coming from too. She didn't want to acknowledge this as a rape for a very long time because it took away her power, and the word fight gave her more agency.
You know, before we continue with this, Marjorie and I at the top of the show, we were talking about the conspiracy theories about Taylor Swift and Joe Biden and the Super Bowl.
Oh my gosh.
There are
Yes.
the conspiracy theories about the use of the word rape and what E. Jean Carroll said to Anderson Cooper a few years ago about rape being sexy is another example of mis and disinformation, as you know, but I'm not sure everybody else does. When she said rape is sexy, she was talking about how it is perceived, unfortunately, by much of the population, not how she perceived it. I'm right there,
Right.
Jessica, am I not?
Yeah, so I was actually with her at the taping of that
you were?
Anderson Cooper episode. It was when I was profiling her a few years ago. And, you know, I remember standing on the sidelines with the producer, hearing those words come out of her mouth and thinking, oh God, people are not going to get what you were saying here. I think what she was trying to say is that, yes, look at Game of Thrones, look at all these films, like the raping of women is used for entertainment value. But was the American public in sound bites, in 2-second clips that are shared on Twitter and TikTok going to understand the complexity of that? No. And so I think it was a pretty poor choice of words.
We're talking with Jessica Bennett, contributing editor for the opinion section of the New York Times, who wrote a terrific piece, many other columns too, but this one was about E. Jean Carroll. You know, I started at the beginning talking about disrespect for older women. I'm not sure if Carroll had to show pictures of herself when she was younger. But I know that Jessica Leeds, who also testified in the first trial, she's the woman that alleged that Trump was groping her on an airplane, and at the time he said what he said about Carroll, oh, she's not my type. And it was sort of depressing that what Leeds had to do was put out these pictures of her as a 30-year-old woman as opposed to the older woman she is now, to prove that somehow she was worthy to be groped on the airplane. I mean, that was a lot of the underpinning in the Carroll case, too, because she's 80 now, even though she was 52 when this happened. So what do we make of that?
That was one of the saddest points of the first trial to me, when Jessica Leeds, who had accused Trump of groping her on an airplane in, I believe, the late 70s or early 80s, had to say to the jury and to everyone in the courtroom, like, look, I was a much more beautiful woman then.
Yeah.
And, you know, E. Jean Carroll looks amazing for 80.
She does.
She's very glamorous. She doesn't look 80, in my opinion. Jessica Leeds looks a little bit more her age. But the mere fact that she had to be defending that as if, A, that matters at all as far as someone sexually assaulting you. Like, we know that sexual assault is about power, not about sex appeal. And yet, you have to kind of preempt these biases, I think, to show that, especially if Trump's going around saying, she's not my type, she's not my type, and in Jessica Leeds' case, she wouldn't have been my first choice, to say, hey, look, I was attractive enough to be groped.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting in the latest defamation trial, you know, even Carroll's own lawyers at various points seemed to take every opportunity to remind the jury that she had once been young and hot. So there were, book cover, headshot images, discussions of all the cool guys she had dated in the past and how she could have had her pick of anyone, as if to say, see, he could have been her type.
Jessica, Ben, I have one more question about the trial itself and being in the courtroom where you and Marjorie started a few minutes ago. Were you positioned so that you were able to see the jury or no?
Kind of, on the side. I could see the sides of some of their faces.
You know, well, you probably know, you may have been there for this too, Roberta Kaplan did an interview the night of the verdict with Anderson Cooper, and she said, I'm paraphrasing, unequivocally that Trump walking out in the middle of her closing argument had an impact on the jury in a positive way, positive for her client, for E. Jean Carroll. How did they, from what you were able to see, how did they react to Trump's behavior in the courtroom? Whether it was his childish behavior at the table, walking out in the middle of Kaplan, were you able to ascertain any of that or no?
It was honestly hard to tell. I think her lawyers had a better view, but I also think they were a bit stone-faced. We didn't know what they were thinking. And I kept thinking to myself, I don't know how the jury is going to interpret this. Like, things inside that courtroom are so different from when you walk out the door. It was interesting even to see the way that the judge could command the courtroom and did, to a large degree, keep Trump under control until that last moment when he walked out. Whereas as soon as his lawyers walked out, they made it seem like he was the one in charge.
Well, I wonder when he did walk out, would he just all of a sudden stand up, turn around, and exit? Or mid-closing argument? And was it dramatic, or what was that like?
Well, Carroll's lawyer, Roberta Kaplan, told me that she actually didn't even notice that he had walked out. And so it worked to her benefit, I think, just carried on as if nothing had happened. And I think that's honestly kind of the way you have to treat him. Carry on as if nothing happened. And I think the jury, his walking out came at a time when Carroll's lawyers were arguing that he thinks he is above the law. Yeah. And so you have to think, was this a strategic decision? Is he smart enough to make that connection? Do you walk out to say, yeah, I am above the law? But he did come back in. And I actually thought it was pretty remarkable the way that Judge Kaplan, no relation to Roberta Kaplan, E. Jean Carroll's lawyer, was able to keep him in line. And I've never seen that. I would not have maybe expected that.
Well, didn't he at one point, the judge, tell Trump's lawyer, what's her name, Habeen, whatever her name is, I forget.
Alina Habba.
Thank you. Didn't he at one point tell her to sit down and stop talking?
At multiple points. At one point he said, you might have to spend some time in lockup.
I love that.
But it was funny, too, to see how her behavior and demeanor shifted when Trump was in the courtroom and when he was out of the courtroom.
What a shock. Well, that's the audience of one notion. Isn't that essentially isn't that what that's all about?
Well, look, you have to act like a litigator. There are rules. There are many, many rules. I don't understand the rules. I'm not a lawyer. But there are many rules. And Judge Kaplan was interjecting over and over and over again to say, you're not following this rule, you're not following that rule, you're doing this wrong, this is law school 101, what are you doing? Sit down. When you rise, one person needs to rise, the other person can't speak. And so she was being admonished over and over and over again, but trying to convert her behavior so that she wouldn't be. And yet when Trump was in the room, it was much more bombastic and showy and performance driven.
Do you have a sense that she had much experience in this sort of thing?
I don't know. I mean, from what I've read, she had been plucked by Trump because he saw her on television and thought she was a great commentator. And, there's a difference between being a good on-air TV attorney and actually being a litigator in court.
Well, she was also very good-looking, like a lot of them.
That has nothing to do with Donald Trump, of course.
Right.
Jessica, before you go, can we briefly for a minute talk about one other piece you wrote, the title of which is Maybe This Is Why Trump is Afraid to Debate Nikki Haley. You mentioned in the column this wonderful debate exchange between the odious Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley. Here it is.
In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my daughter out of your voice.
Your adult daughter. The next generation of Americans are using it. And that's actually the point. You have her supporters propping her up. That's fine. Here's the truth.
You're just
the easy
scum.
answer.
You're just scum. A hell of a lot. We know we've talked a lot on the show about Trump having trouble with women, particularly women of color, almost all of whom are racist, as we know, if you listen to Donald Trump. What was your point in that piece, Jessica?
Well, my point was actually more about the high heels comments.
Yes.
Because if you'll remember, Ron DeSantis may or may not have been wearing lifts in his cowboy boots.
That's correct.
And so there were all these hilarious memes on the internet about analyzing whether or not he was wearing lifts. And then meanwhile, Haley has this line that she likes to say about how she's doing all that she's doing, but she's doing it in heels. And she, in fact, was wearing these very high heels on stage. But I think what was interesting is the way that she was able to pierce back at those comments in a way that kind of played into gender stereotypes, but rebutted them at the same time. Like she was like, yeah, I do wear high heels. I still am very feminine, which we know is a thing that we kind of expect of leaders, even if we want them to be good leaders. And yet at the same time, I can run in these heels. I forget what she said. I can use them as ammunition, whatever that means, sort of mixed metaphors. And then I went down a rabbit hole trying to look up the actual high heels that she was wearing because they kept referring to them as 4-inch heels. And I believe that I found them, and I think they were actually 5-inch heels, which I thought was very funny because they're all. What is this debate really about? It's like whose stuff is bigger. And so at the very end, I was thinking to myself, well, her heels are actually higher.
Hey, Jessica Bennett,
Jessica,
I'm so
great
glad
pieces.
you took the time to
Great
join
to
us
meet you.
today. Great
Thanks.
stuff in the Times, and thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Bennett is a contributing editor for the opinion section of the New York
Fabulous piece.
Times. She teaches journalism at New York University and is the author of Feminist Fight Club and This is 18. Thanks again to Jessica Bennett. Okay, after a quick break, we're going to talk with John King from CNN. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
John. Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan and Jim Browdy live from the library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. Is that right, Jim? Yes, it is. We're joined now on Zoom by the pride of Dorchester, CNN's chief national correspondent, John King. He's involved with two great reporting projects this election cycle, All Over the Map and The Battleground. Hello, John King.
Happy Tuesday.
And to you.
Hello, John King. Thank you so much for joining us. So let's start with immigration. We know that shutting down the border is a huge issue, particularly it's an issue for Democrats. It's a really big issue for Republicans. But it seemed that they were close to a deal on immigration, but not so much now. Apparently, House Speaker Johnson, after being accused that Republicans were backing off the immigration deal because Donald Trump didn't want it, the Speaker denied that this morning, that they were changing their minds because of President Trump. But what's really going on, John?
President Trump doesn't want it. No matter what the Speaker of the House says. Look, there's no question, to be fair to the Speaker of the House, if something emerges from the Senate, and let's keep an if on that, there's good faith negotiations. And whether you're a Democrat or Republican or an independent listening, tip your hat to the people who are trying to figure out something on an issue that has confounded Washington for more than 25 years. They're trying to come up with some border security package that then would be connected to other things like Israel aid and Ukraine aid. But first, they have to come up with this border security package. The president, who has a very tough political time on this issue, it comes up a lot. It's not just among Republicans, Jim and Marjorie. This issue comes up a lot when you travel, says he would sign it. It will not do as much as House Republicans would like. And so here's the conundrum for House Republicans. You believe the border is a problem. The Democrats, if they get this deal through the Senate, are about to give you something they've refused to give you for a number of years, which is a lot of money for border security, actual border security. And the president says he would close down parts of the border, if not more, the day one, if he signed this bill. So they're not going to get everything they want, but they are going to get a significant something on an issue that they for years have said is absolutely critical. But now, because former President Trump doesn't want Joe Biden to get any credit and maybe political benefit in an election year, says don't do it. And so the question is, does it collapse in the House, or could you get, a lot of liberal Democrats won't want to vote for this either. And so the first challenge is, can you get it through the Senate? Let's be honest about that. That's still steep. If that happens, if you get something through the Senate, then I think we're going to have a really fascinating conversation among Democrats and Republicans, but especially among Republicans, is why have you been saying for years this is a giant problem and now you won't do anything about it?
You know, and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you just mentioned this. I lost you for about 10 seconds there, John King. But the Republican leader of these negotiations, Langford from Oklahoma, has been censured by his home state's Republican Party. And the sin he committed is he's trying to negotiate a deal about the border. Is that essentially accurate?
Correct. He's trying to do his job, Jim, and that's bad. He's literally, again, a principled conservative. Most liberals won't agree. Most Democrats, even center Democrats, won't agree with Senator Langford on many issues. He is a very principled conservative. But he wants to do his job, which is to actually improve security at the border, even if he can't get everything he thinks should be done. So he's negotiating in good faith with the Democrats, and for that he was sanctioned by the Republican Party back home because he's, I believe he's doing what he was elected to do, and apparently that's a bad thing.
You know, also Langford, it seems to me, I think it was Langford I heard in a statement yesterday, almost had the courage to criticize Trump, not by name, but seemed to be criticizing the forces that were standing in the way of serious consideration of this. So is there any chance this makes it through all of the hurdles on both sides and actually lands on Joe Biden's desk?
I do think it's a shrinking number, but there are still principled Republicans like Senator Langford who probably agree with Donald Trump on a lot of things, who probably would support the Trump agenda if Trump wins the election, but who believe that it is their job today, Tuesday, when Joe Biden is president, and their job tomorrow when Joe Biden will still be president, and the week after that when Joe Biden will still be president, to, if they can advance a policy that they believe is good for the country, they think it's their job to vote for it. I mean, God forbid, huh? Wow, that's a crazy thing I just said, right? That if you can do something that you believe is good for the country, you would actually earn your paycheck and bring it to the floor, debate amendments, and vote on it.
And meanwhile,
wow, what a concept.
Yeah, and as you said, not only doing something good for your country, but we're supposed to be helping the Ukrainians, and we're supposed to be helping Israel, and we're not able to do that.
Those are the other pieces that you're not going to get. You're not going to get, especially Ukraine money. You could get funding for Israel through on its own, but the Democrats, and again, this is a conversation you can have as well. The Democrats, quote unquote, smartly. I wish Washington could do everything on its merits. We could do, let's talk about Israel, let's talk about Ukraine, let's talk about immigration. Town doesn't work that way. So you need a big train, right? To get controversial things through, you need a train where the locomotive and the caboose are very popular, and then you put the other stuff in the middle and you drive the train to the White House and the president signs it. That's the way it works. Unfortunately, this town has lost its ability to go one issue at a time. Like I said, have a conversation, make a proposal, allow amendments, have a debate. There's cameras in the room. Voters can watch at home. Seems nuts, right? I think they call that democracy.
So, John King, speaking of impossible problems, well, actually, this one may be possible if people were doing it, acting as you're suggesting, like grown-ups. Where is the president in terms of responding to the deaths of these 3 Americans in Jordan vis-a-vis Iran?
Yeah, I'm exhaling there, sighing, because I think we have an interesting, and that's a very neutral word, we have a troubling week ahead of us. The president said today in a response to a question from my colleague at the White House, Arlette Saenz, one of our great White House correspondents, that he has made a decision about how to respond. He did not say what he has decided. She asked him, has he made a decision about how to respond? And he said yes. He did not say what he had decided. Look, there are people a lot smarter than I am who do this for a living, the national security reporters and the analysts. And if you look through different options, do you attack Iranian-sponsored militias that are all around the Middle East, in Iraq, in Syria, elsewhere? Do you do something inside the borders of Iran? Do you take out Iranian naval vessels or Iranian-sponsored? These options range from difficult to terrible. But the president's going to do something, obviously. There have been scores of these attacks, dozens of these attacks on U.S. military installations around the region. And the fingerprints are Iranian-backed groups. The Hamas attack has Iranian fingerprints. The Hezbollah attacks have Iranian fingerprints. So there's no question here who the baddest, worst actor is in the region. The challenge is in the middle of the Israel-Gaza conflict, Israel-Hamas conflict. Now you have Iran deciding to raise the volume and raise the temperature with these, what had been, I'm going to call them nuisance attacks. I don't mean that the way it sounds, but now American blood has been spilled and American lives have been lost. So they have escalated this. And the president has a very difficult choice. Is how do you respond forcefully anyway? Plus, we just are in this political climate, which, you would hope it doesn't have any impact, but it would be naive to think that it doesn't. We're in January of an election year. Donald Trump and others are saying Joe Biden is weak. The president's been at this, especially the national security stuff, a long time, including his days in the Senate. So he's apparently made the decision, and I guess we will see the impact of that, the results, the details of that, I would assume, in the next 24 to 72 hours. And then we'll be having this conversation next Tuesday, I guarantee it, with now what?
One last related thing, since you were talking about the broader Middle East conflict. I've mentioned twice on the show pretty stunning numbers that I saw on your station this morning on CNN, that in 2020, Joe Biden won 18 to 29-year-olds by 24 points. He now leads in that demographic by a mere 2. Is the situation in Gaza and climate, are they the two primary drivers of young people away from Joe Biden, or am I missing something else?
No, you're dead spot on. I was out in Michigan, it's a few weeks back now, but really struck on the Wayne State University campus right down in downtown Detroit. Significant Arab American population there, younger Arab Americans there. And then on the University of Michigan campus in Ann Arbor, and the visceral anger of younger people about that they view the president as being too pro-Israel and not sensitive enough to Palestinian lives was remarkable. There's more to it. The climate piece is some of it, and the president, frankly, has not done a good job communicating the things he has done on the climate. There's a generational divide. A lot of them are, they're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 years old, and they say, why do we have to have an 80-year-old president? There's a generational thing. But I will tell you, just the state of Michigan, Jim, when you're looking at the map, there are about 300, 400,000 Arab American voters. So you have the young voters on the campus. Then you have a large Arab American population in Dearborn and other places in Michigan. If the election were tomorrow, the president would lose Michigan because of this issue, without a doubt.
You know what I wonder, though? I mean, obviously, Trump could not have been cozier with Israel when he was the president. When you do the follow-up, do they think that Trump would be preferable on Israel and Gaza?
Trump has also said some pretty horrible things about Muslims, and the Arab Americans remember that. So I do think I said if the election were tomorrow, the president would lose Michigan. It's not tomorrow, and you'll see if you can just go on the internet and look. The president's campaign manager and other people have been out there trying to meet with people to at least start a dialogue with them. The president himself had some meetings, I believe, with Muslim Americans the other day to try to start a dialogue about this. He believes, he's doing the best he can on the policy. But the blowback, when I was out there, the Arab American News, which is one of the publisher of the Arab American News, is one of the people who met with the Biden campaign manager. The headline of the newspaper essentially said, reject Biden. And their attitude at the moment is they don't care what the alternative is. They're so mad at Biden, they think he needs to be punished for what he has done. But that doesn't mean that will be how they feel about this come November. You're right. If they have a contrast with, Biden has done this, but look at his overall record, that's the case the Biden campaign will make and the White House will make, that look at, okay, you're mad about this, we get it. But look at the bigger record, the 40 plus years of public service compared to Donald Trump. That's a cooler heads conversation, a back and forth. There's not cool heads about this at the moment.
So I'm curious, we've been talking all day about E. Jean Carroll and the $83 million award she got from a jury last week for defamation. The second trial, of course, in the first trial, she got far less money, but in both trials, the president was found liable of sexual assault and of defaming her, and then, because he kept doing it, the second trial. Does this impact Trump world at all? Or I'm not even sure, after being up in New Hampshire, talking to many, many voters up there with our team there, that they didn't seem to believe almost anything that the Trump administration had done wrong, or the president himself. And I'm wondering if that's just the same with this verdict against him in the E. Jean Carroll case.
I think most Trump voters have, for whatever reason, either they think he's under attack or everything's magnified, or everyone's out to get him, or they've created a vault in their head. Most loyal Trump voters have just created a vault where, it's not that he can do no wrong, but that all this stuff, well, maybe it is that he can do no wrong. That they give him amazing grace and wide latitude that they've given nobody else in the history of American politics, at least in my lifetime. However, I think your point, Marjorie, and this goes back to the same conversation we were just having about whether it's young voters or Arab American voters, in the heat of the moment, you think certain things, but come October, November, you can be sure that when you're trying to get suburban women, independents, moderate Republicans in the Philadelphia suburbs and in the Cleveland suburbs and in the Atlanta suburbs and in the Milwaukee suburbs and the Detroit suburbs, that issue, Trump's treatment of women, period, Trump's coarse language toward women, period, and the particulars of the E.J. and Carroll case, I don't think it's a stretch to think that whether it's in Biden campaign advertising or just anti-Trump advertising by other forces, that will be part of the effort to remind, all Americans, but particularly suburban women who might be mad about inflation or might be disappointed in Biden and something else, think twice about this.
Well, I hope that's true, but I've said this on the air the other day. I was watching one of your colleagues, and my apologies, I forget who it was interviewing 5 Republican women from South Carolina on the day of the verdict, but before the verdict had come down. 2 of them supported Haley, 3 supported Trump, and your colleague asked a Trump woman, who I would say was maybe 35 years old, what she thought of the trial. Again, this is pre-verdict. And she had a one-word answer to the first question. You could probably guess what it was: witch hunt. And when she was asked a follow-up question, she again repeated verbatim what Donald Trump says: they're not coming for him, they're coming for me. And you said a minute ago that no one has ever been able to get away with what Donald Trump has been able to get away with and succeed. And at the same time, I don't think I've ever seen a politician whose words are integrated into the lexicon of people and spit back verbatim like Donald Trump. Have you? I mean, it really is almost like it's a tutorial where they memorize them and repeat them.
And look, he's effective at it. And so we used to always ask, why is he tweeting at 5 o'clock in the morning, or why does he tweet 27 times a day? It's the repetitive nature of it. And so I think one of the things that's hard to understand, Jim, Marjorie, me, we're all of a certain age, is spending more time on how much our industry has fractured and how much there are quote unquote media organizations. They call themselves that you and I, the 3 of us, would never label as media organizations because they don't follow the rules that we follow, but that they're propaganda outlets. And they just churn this stuff in his language. They repeat his words. And it has an impact. It has a giant impact as a citizen, as someone who's done this for 40 years. Forget the names, forget the issue you're talking about. How people get information. Look, it's everybody's individual choice, but it is dangerous how people are just locked into their silos and not challenging what they're being told.
We're talking to CNN's John King.
So is Nikki Haley going to make it to Super Tuesday? What do you think?
It's a great question. I'm going to South Carolina in the morning for the next installment of All Over the Map. She has decided to fight it out. We'll see if she makes it all the way. There are some people who think that she's trying to move the numbers. You have a month between New Hampshire and South Carolina. The Republican primary is on Saturday, the 24th of February. So we still have a few weeks to go. There are some who think that if she gets, 10 days out and hasn't moved the numbers, that maybe she'll bow out then. To not lose her home state. She says no. She says she's going to stay in through South Carolina and go on through Super Tuesday. It's an interesting calculation. There hasn't been any recent polling that I have seen that I trust, but by all accounts, she's losing in her home state. Even among voters who say they liked her as governor, think that Trump would be the better president right now, or their loyalty to Trump is, higher than their loyalty or affinity for former Governor Haley. I think it's, look, when she first won in 2010 in a crowded primary against three men, she worked her you-know-what off, and she surprised people. So let's watch and let's see. I do think that this is the ultimate test. It's her home state. She's won it a couple times, and it's a very, very Trumpy state now. And Trump was anti-establishment in 2016. He's got anybody with a title down there who's not Nikki Haley is for Trump. So we'll see.
You know, John, before you go, we're not going to ask you your Super Bowl prediction until next week. We have plenty of time. But we're hoping you can settle an argument that we started the show with and with our listeners. The argument was, has the Super Bowl been fixed so that the Kansas City Chiefs can win, so that after the final gun, when they're getting the award and Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce embrace, she can then endorse Joe Biden for president? How likely do you think that scenario is, John King?
I thought she was going to say, I'm going to Disney World. Isn't that what you said? I'm holding out for Brock Purdy and the Niners. That's all I got to say on this one. It's nothing against Taylor Swift. I'm not getting it. My daughter is my daughter's 27 now, but I grew up with a lot of Taylor Swift and Justin Bieber in the house. So, I'm a fan. I just am holding out for Mr. Irrelevant. The last guy taking it. If my guys can't be in it, I want some cool drama like that.
Did you know that, by the way, the quarterback for San Francisco, when he called him Mr. Irrelevant, that's the name given the final person in that particular year's draft, last person chosen in the draft.
All I know,
and he's the quarterback for the Super Bowl team.
Is when I saw him last week, I thought, my goodness, he looks like he's about 17.
He does look like he's a little boy.
He looks so young.
He does.
But, great quarterback. So there you go.
John, we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it as always.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, John King.
He didn't say it wasn't fixed. I don't know if you noticed.
He didn't say that.
It wasn't
That's right.
fixed, no.
Could be, Jim.
Never know.
Could be.
Never know.
Guys from Dorchester know these kinds of things. We're speaking with John King, of course, who is from Dorchester. He's seen as chief national correspondent involved with two great reporting projects this election cycle, all over the map and the battleground. And you get to hear John talking with people that sound so regular, and they say such strange things in many cases. But in any case, it's great to watch.
You know why? Because he treats people as respectfully as anybody in our field does. He really is. And as a result, they trust him enough, whether they think they're crazy about CNN or not, that they're honest with him, which I think is just great.
Well, anyway, coming up after a quick break, we're going to open the phone and text lines about Elon Musk's first Neuralink test subjects. He can put a little chip in your brain, Jim. Jim apparently would like to be next. We're wondering how you feel.
It would be next.
I'm
open to it.
About a little chip in your brain. So your head can answer your phone. Your head can turn on the dishwasher. I mean, is this the next frontier? Do you want to be chipped up so you can turn on the dishwasher just by thinking about it? You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at Facebook.com/GBH News, YouTube.com/GBH News. As Marjorie said, Elon Musk says he's implanted the first Neuralink brain chips in a human with positive results so far. So he says. He's called the product telepathy and says it enables the control of your phone or your computer just by thinking. And for those who aren't caught up with this, Neuralink aims to create a device implanted in the human brain to enable direct communication between the brain and external devices, like, as I just said, a phone or an iPad or whatever. It's in clinical trials right now with quadriplegic test subjects, all of which is great for those with disabilities, potentially enhancing their abilities tremendously. But it's not hard to imagine, a dystopian future of the technology, especially with Musk at the helm. He ultimately wants to combine humans with AI technology, which has been going really great for those in the human race so far. Deep fakes, copyright infringement, etc. Marjorie, I think it's fair to say, is not really into the prospect of the implant. And while she misstated my position as usual, I do not want to be the next person in line. There is a certain appeal, actually, of this to me. And we want to know how you feel about it. Does it scare you? Does it attract you, appeal to you? 877-301-8097. We're going to discuss the really serious aspect of this vis-a-vis people with serious disabilities with Art Kaplan tomorrow.
Right.
In terms of medical ethics and that sort of thing. But why are you repulsed by this, Marjorie?
Well, I just don't think I want to have somebody open up my head and put a chip inside my brain. Much as I'd like to be able to do things, from the car, turn up the heat on the way home in the car. I guess you can already do that with some kind of gadget, but I'm not.
Yeah, it's called your phone.
Yeah, your phone. But
Yes.
but you have to be driving with the phone. So just think
No,
it.
you don't.
You can just think it, and you can think. Make a phone call by thinking.
Why is that not appealing? I mean, I understand why it's not appealing to you.
The part that's not appealing, Jim, is
the insertion of the chip.
Opening up my brain.
Did you put a chip in your dog when your dog was alive?
I did, but
Did you have a problem with that?
It wasn't in his brain, Jim.
Okay.
It was in his back. They put little chips in the back there, and then you can find the dog.
If you were
the dog was
satisfied that there was no risk, and by the way, we should have said this up front. In fairness to your side of this, they are saying was it in chimps that they had used
monkeys,
this?
the monkeys,
there were some negative side
debilitating
effects.
health effects.
Yeah,
is
they
what
don't describe
said.
what they were. But
And also, I'm just a little suspicious of Elon Musk these days. I'm not sure. He's done. I mean, you have a nice Tesla. That's
I do have
very
a Tesla.
nice.
I do. Thank
Of course,
you.
everybody lost their. What did you go from 200 miles down to 20
Well, if you live
miles?
in Chicago, you can't drive the car.
Yeah.
That's essentially
Yeah,
it,
with
right?
the coal. But I'm a big fan of electric
So
cars.
if it was
I don't have one yet.
safe in a way, the concept I'm asking you.
No,
Does the
I'm not
concept
there.
appeal to you?
I want to be. I think I can turn the phone on with my fingers. I think I can do the.
You can't find
computer
anything.
with
What
my-
if it turns out you just thought, and all of a sudden it was sort of like a tag kind of thing? It tagged to your phone or something else that you couldn't find.
Well,
that doesn't
again,
have appeal. All in your head.
Again, I'm sure in 100 years, everybody will be doing this. They won't think it's any big deal. I'm just not there yet to open up my head and put a chip inside my
You know
head.
what the beauty is? You
What's the
wouldn't
beauty?
lose the microchip. That should be really
That's
appealing
right.
to
It's
you.
in there forever. But these are the primitive microchips too. It's Musk said himself, right? He said, "I'm pretty sure you wouldn't want the iPhone 1 stuck in your head if the iPhone 14 is available." And that's a great point. I think the wise person
Switch it up.
would wait until the iPhone 14 version of the brain chip.
You want a
is
serious
available.
answer to that? When there's a software update, I don't have to take my car in. Do you know what they do?
Yeah, they
do it remotely. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what they do with your
Well,
brain chip.
Even Elon says that he would prefer to wait for the iPhone 14 version, and only the iPhone 1 version is available
Here's
right
a
now.
good text. First text, is this chip compatible with my Bill Gates COVID vaccine chip? See, that's the problem is nobody trusts anybody. And that is a fairly
here's
appealing
another
thing.
great point. Are we going to have to worry about viruses in the brain chip? That's another great point, too.
another
You
good
have them in your
point.
computer. Okay, 877.
How about ads? What didn't Zoe say to us this morning?
Oh,
what
that's
if
the
they
other
played
thing.
ads
That's what's
on your
going to happen.
chip?
That's right. Ads on your
You're
chip.
just like
Can you
doing the show,
imagine?
for example.
Yeah, the Applebee's ad will come on, or the Walmart ad will come on, or the A Million Drugs That Could Solve Your Problems ads will come on, or the car ads. Yeah, that could be
That'd be
difficult.
troubling.
You know what they'll say to you after a while? If they chip you in for
$2.99 a
while?
month,
That's right.
ad-free.
That's right. You got to pay.
Your microchip in your brain is ad-free. Let's go to Jay in New Bedford. You're first on the Neuralink Brain Chip Hour here on Boston Public Radio. Welcome there, Jay. Hi.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie. How you doing today?
I think we're quite well. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, listen, I wanted to just briefly make a comment
Please.
that goes beyond Neuralink.
Yep.
Because I think that there's a kind of interest convergence. Like if you look at Neuralink in terms of the way that it shows up in the media, right? There's a kind of interest convergence in the sense that it's put out to the public as though it's about helping individuals who may be quadriplegic and so forth, right? But if you look at AI, broadly speaking, every kind of institution, every kind of possible institution is having issues with AI, and there's no clear policy on AI, you know? And I think that this is just an extension of that type of technology. If you look at colleges, for example, there's no college that I know of that has a very clear-cut policy on the use of ChatGPT and those types of platforms. But right now, they're talking about the military being able to use AI in terms of offensive capabilities. But there's no clear policy.
Can I tell you, Jay, can I cut you off right there? And not to disagree with you, but to agree that, first of all, I think a lot of universities have developed ChatGPT on the as quickly as they possibly could, maybe not as comprehensively as they'd like. The one thing you're totally right about, and I'm sure we'll hear this from Art Kaplan tomorrow, the regulation should precede the technology implementation. There's no question about that, or the potential for it to get out of control is huge. So you make a wonderful point, a point we should have made, and as I say, I'm pretty sure Art will make the same point tomorrow. Thanks for calling and saying that, Joe. We appreciate it.
Tom from Exeter, New Hampshire is concerned we'll get hacked.
Well, that's another problem, isn't it?
Jan in the kitchen says, so with this technology, someone could theoretically pardon themselves just by thinking about it. And that, of course, is a reference to the former President Donald Trump, who could just think about things like unclassifying documents just by thinking about it.
He did say so long ago. He did say he disclassified them by just thinking about it on the way out.
Yeah, it was a telepathic kind of thing.
Yeah.
Ann from Puerto Rico, what do you think?
Hey, Ann, what's up?
Yes, hi. My mother was a quadriplegic. She got polio in 1952, and she lived as a quadriplegic for 22 years, completely dependent on everyone around her and helpless. She would have taken any measure. She would have taken any risk. She would have been a guinea pig in a heartbeat if she could have had any control over her life. So I think that the potential for people who are disabled, particularly a quadriplegic, is worth almost any risk. It would have been to my mother. I know that for sure. She would have tried anything.
You know, Ann, I hope you'll listen tomorrow, too, because I am generally of the opinion that if someone is in an extreme situation and is made fully aware of what the risks are of a certain treatment, that they should be able to get that treatment unless it's inherently dangerous. Art Kaplan does not agree with that at all. He thinks that's a very dangerous proposition. So I'm going to broach your mother's situation with him tomorrow. I hope you'll listen because I'm with you, but I don't think he is. And thanks for the call.
But as you said at the beginning, Jim, the device is currently in clinical trials exactly for what Ann was talking about, for quadriplegics, for people that have ALS or a spinal cord injury, to enable people in those situations. I mean,
well, it depends how serious the pilot programs are. You don't know with Elon Musk or anybody else who wants to make a buck.
And he was also talking about Stephen Hawking, a brilliant physicist, the late Stephen Hawking, and who was unable to, he was, I don't know if he was quadriplegic, but he was unable to communicate
through a computer.
Yeah, and so he communicated through a computer, but how he could communicate so much faster
if it worked,
if this kind of thing worked. So I mean, there's some medical things that would make a big difference, but I don't know, for the average Joe and Jane, I think we can turn on the lights, turn on the dishwasher, open the refrigerator. I think we can do all these things by ourselves. We already have a problem with exercising around here.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Do you use, I'm sure you don't, do you know that at Whole Foods Market in the last couple of months you can use your palm to pay for
do.
If you obviously can't figure that out, right?
No, I don't do that.
And that's because you haven't figured it out, right?
Well,
Yes, exactly.
I just don't want myself all over the place.
Okay, what if you had a chip, not in your brain, in your hand, that would allow you to just wave it at the cashier at Whole Foods Market or anywhere else and you were paid? That wouldn't have an appeal to you?
A chip in my hand was different.
Okay, a chip
it's
in your hand.
It's in my head that makes me a little bit nervous.
A chip in your hand.
What about my hair? What would happen to my hair?
That's a really good point. It'd be a big hole right in the middle there.
Square right in the middle of my forehead or the back of my head.
When it comes, the Neuralink brain chip comes with a magic marker, though, which is the exact same color as your hair color.
If you have a receding hairline, it wouldn't be such a big deal.
That's because they wouldn't know the difference.
They wouldn't know the difference, but if you have a lot of hair,
no, let me tell you
something.
I criticize you often. You've thought of so many of the issues that are attendant to this in such a serious way. I really got to compliment
only your hairdresser knows for sure.
I think that's probably
Kelly
true.
in the car, what do you think?
Oh, hi.
Hawking at ALS, that's right. Thank you for correcting us. Thank you. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Oh, no, your conversation reminds me of my mother, who's long passed. But back in, I think it was the late 60s or 70s, when TV started getting the remote controls.
Yeah.
And she was so against it. She said, the day I can't get up and turn the station is the day you can put me in the grave. So, it's just
like Marjorie.
Because I'm not that lazy. And I think this is just promoting more laziness.
Wait, so you're with your mother on this thing. You were anti-remote and anti-brain chip.
Well, I'm fine with the remote just because I grew up with it. I was young then, but she was not. And I think she thought getting up and turning the station and just moving was better than sitting doing nothing.
Kelly, you're sitting on your couch and you're exhausted at the end of the day and you forgot to turn on the dishwasher. How great would it be if you just thought it and all of a sudden the dishwasher turned on? Would that not have appeal to you?
Obscenities here are people that are extremely overweight. What's the cause here? We just don't do anything anymore. And I think, well, if you got to get up and turn on the dishwasher, so be it.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the call.
Remember
Kelly?
that horrible story years ago when the woman sat on the couch so long that she was weaved her skin and it became
the weave
one?
of the couch, yeah.
That was a very sad
that was
story.
awful. How far would you have to be? Could you do this from your car? I mean, if you're driving home if you're on the Mass Pike in Newton and you live in downtown
Newton is
Boston.
as far as you can be. Newton is the you can be in Newton and Brookline can turn off the dishwasher.
Okay, 877-311.
Do you not think, by the way, at a moment of seriousness, do you not think this is going to be happening in 10 years?
I don't know. Zoe had an idea about putting a chip in the head of your pet. Like maybe you could put it in your cat, and your cat would learn to empty the litter box by itself, or feed itself, or get the food, think of the food, and be able to get the food. Maybe that would be a first. They've done it in the monkeys. Maybe they could move it into the cats.
You just said you did have a chip in Harry the Pea, best dog from
his
sea to
back.
sea.
It wasn't in his head.
Well, whatever.
Yeah, well, that's different. That's so that you can find. It's not changing your brain chemistry. It's or adding something to your brain or cutting open your head. It's putting it in your back so if your dog gets lost, you can find him. Didn't you do that with your kids' dogs?
No.
You didn't?
Maybe.
I think so.
I don't know.
bet they did, Jim.
I don't know.
Michael from
You know what
Belmont.
happened? I just realized we did. We put it in the dog. You know what happened right after that? The dishwasher went on. Is that incredible? Implant it in the dog, and everything in the house is turned on. It was really a horrible story. It's very sad.
The dog wanted the dishes cleaner than they were before that,
fine.
Jim.
Okay,
Michael
good.
from Belmont.
Hey,
Thank you for
Michael.
calling.
Hey, I'm in Somerville now. Anyway, I'm pulled over. So
Okay, good.
hands-free.
Very glad to hear
Jim,
that.
I don't think you need a chip in your hand. I mean, it's called a phone in your hand. We got all the chips we need.
We do.
To a certain extent, we're reinventing the wheel here. And I'm kind of worried, though. I believe in what you said, Marjorie, about people getting medical help with full disclosure and informed consent. But I also wonder if this isn't the camel nose under the tent with the advertisers. I don't know if you all saw Minority Report. I think there's going to be maybe a movement of people who draw the line and sort of modern day Amish and are just going to say no. I'm just going to say no chips in my head. Other than that, give me all the gadgets. I love the convenience,
but no
there
chips
are
in my
lines.
head. Yeah,
Don't cut me open, okay?
Well, that's Marjorie's position. I mean, you're pretty much open to different kinds of technology, but you're where Michael is. No chips in my head.
Not
is that
yet.
Not your line?
I'm not persuaded yet. And Cody just
Thank you,
pointed
Michael.
out that he apparently already has a chip in his head. For some reason, he keeps singing 1877 Cars for Kids. 1877 Cars for Kids. A lot of people are concerned about getting hacked, and some Weisenheimer here wants to know if the chip can give you a shock if you drive in the bus lane.
Can I ask you, that would be you. Can I ask you a question about 1877 Cars for Kids? How many times in your life do you think you've seen that commercial, roughly?
Oh, God, hundreds.
Hundreds, if not thousands.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question for you. You're a pretty smart person.
Have you given a car to a kid?
What's it for?
It's something, I don't know. It's something to do
What
with...
does the money go to?
Isn't it some Jewish organization?
It is. I can't believe you actually know
Yeah.
that. I would say that 99% of the people have absolutely no idea, nor do they even attempt to tell you what that car or that piece of property you're going to donate
Well, elaborate on that.
is going to. I don't remember the details.
Does it go to Jewish kids?
I don't know. We'll find out tomorrow. I'll
Okay,
have to look
find
it
out
up.
tomorrow. Look it up.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Also reminiscent of Stepford Wives, says Ron in Westport.
Remember
That's
the
a very
Stepford
good point.
Wives?
Yes, I do.
That was Catherine Ross.
Thank
John,
you,
you were
John is
incredible.
unbelievable. He knows
Was Catherine
everything.
Ross also the one in
The Graduate.
The Graduate.
And she was in the Paul Newman movie too, the Butch Cassidy and the Sun's Aunt Kid.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Butch
you, John,
Cassidy,
for
the Son.
that.
Oh,
and she's
my
Sam
God.
Elliott's wife.
John knows everything. Sam
He
Elliott's
does
wife.
pretty much know everything.
John is our producer.
And by the way, he doesn't even have a chip in his head.
John-
He knows all this. I want to be clear. If some people think he's got a leg up on people because of the chip thing, chip free. We know. We all have to go through a scan when we go to GBH. Where are we going here,
Okay.
friends? Nowhere? Good. Okay. Oh, there we are. Michael on the road.
Oh.
Hey, Michael, what's
Hey.
up?
How are you? I love you guys.
Thank you.
I'm delighted to get on here.
We
I
are
just
too.
have to tell you that we have a Roomba
Yeah.
at home.
I have
the
one. I have
vacuum.
one too, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bought it for my wife. I love it. Mm-hmm. I had a minor operation a short while ago. I woke up out of anesthesia, and I started telling the doctor how fantastic my Roomba was, and how much I loved it. So I think it makes my life so much better. My wife, on the other hand, thinks I'm a bit over the top, but I love it, and I think AI in certain ways is going to be fantastic.
Okay. Okay, let's cut to the bottom of this, Michael.
Going.
You came out of anesthesia, and the first thing you said to your surgeon is how much you love your Roomba?
Well, it wasn't the first thing, but I did end up talking to him. He was a young doctor, a surgeon, and basically, I don't know how I did it, but all of a sudden, I started telling him, singing the praises of my Roomba, and that he needs one. He needs one for his house.
Sure he does. Well, I mean, can't quarrel with that piece of information. Thanks for sharing that with us. We hope you've fully recovered. Michael, thank you very much for the call. We appreciate it.
Reed from Warren, Rhode Island has a question.
What is that? I can answer it.
If both Marjorie and Jim get a chip, could Marjorie just think, please, Jim, just shut up? And he would. That's an excellent question, Reed from Warren, Rhode Island.
That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, a lot of people are concerned about data breaches and hacking, and I think that they're absolutely right. Okay.
By the way, I had a guy from MIT who's quite famous. I should have thought of this earlier in the show, who invented prosthetics. Did you see that when he was on the show? Where he lost his legs on Mount Washington, actually, and he invented these prosthetics that respond in the exact same way that Elon Musk hopes this Neuralink works. He just thinks it, and the prosthetic acts.
Well, that's pretty neat.
Well, it's a variation exactly on what Elon Musk is saying here. We're done, Marjorie.
Okay, we are done.
We're
Thank
done.
you very much for listening today to the show. If we're going to be back tomorrow, we have a podcast 24/7. You can listen to us on the podcast if you'd like to. A 3-hour one and a half-hour one. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined by NYU medical ethicist Art Kaplan, Harvard national security expert Juliet Kayyem, Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Young, author and naturalist Cy Montgomery, whom we recently visited at our home in Hancock, New Hampshire, while we were up there covering the primaries. We got to meet a massive snapping turtle.
Fire chief.
That had a body about,
42 pounds.
Yeah, it was a big snapping turtle. I got to pet its shell, actually. We're also going to have the housing panel with Jesse Partridge Guerrero from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council and Angie Liu from the Asian Community Development Corporation. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer, John the Claw Parker, who whispers in our ear everything we don't know because he knows everything. And our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. We want to thank the special team down here at the Boston Public Library, Maddie Geyer and Angelica Marrero. Do you have anything to say, Jim?
I do. I just did some Googling while you were doing that. You will not be able to tell me through your chip to stop talking. There's certain things that are exempted from the Neuralink.
Okay.
That would be one of them. I'm sorry about that, but it is what it is.
All right, Jim, thank you very much.
We'll see you tomorrow. I'm Jim Browdy.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you can tune in tomorrow. And meanwhile, have a great afternoon.
Thanks.